Let's head over to the small, quiet town of Mlang in North Cotabato, Philippines. It's a place known for its calm vibe and rural charm, where life moves at a slower pace. The people here are deeply connected to the land, relying on agriculture for their livelihood. In this peaceful town lived the Maguad family. Unlike many others, they led a pretty stable life. Cruz Maguad, the father, was an elementary school teacher who was well respected and loved by everyone, often being praised for his hard work. His wife, Lovella, was the principal at the same school. Together, while they didn't make a lot of money, they were considered one of the more privileged families in town. Their youngest child, Cruz Maguad, was 16 years old. He dreamed of becoming a lawyer even at such a young age and was determined to work hard to achieve that goal. Besides being intelligent, he was also creative, playing guitar, drawing, and reading in his spare time. His older sister, Cruz Maguad, was the more intense one, super smart, driven, and goal-oriented. She had always been that way as a kid, being a Girl Scout with a sash covered in so many badges that there was no room for more. Gwen didn't stop there. She enrolled in a pre-med program during high school and planned to become a doctor. By all accounts, Gwen was the type of person who would sit with you at a party if you were feeling shy, sticking by your side until you felt at ease. That's how she met 17-year-old Janice Sibiel. However, unlike Gwen and Lewis, Janice's childhood was far from happy. She wasn't privileged enough to attend school and had to work from a very young age. Even worse, she grew up without parents. Her first real memories began around the age of 8. Before that, everything was a blur. She only recalls being found by a stranger wandering alone on a huge shipping container boat. Her parents were nowhere to be found, and Janice believed they had abandoned her. A stranger was kind enough to post her picture and name online in an attempt to find her parents. They shared her story on Facebook and various online forums, but no one ever came forward. Eventually, Janice was dropped off at the Philippine version of Child Protective Services, the Department of Social Welfare and Development, where she moved from one foster home to another. Not long after, Janice was offered a live-in nanny job by a family. Though she hated the job, she was incredibly grateful for the opportunity. Janice shared all of this with Gwen, and Gwen was so deeply moved by her story that an idea began to form in her mind, an idea that could give Janice the safe, loving home she deserved: adoption. Together with Lewis, Gwen decided to present this idea to their parents. Like a well-thought-out thesis, they approached the subject with serious dedication, explaining that adopting Janice wouldn't just change her life, it would help their family too. They convinced their parents that Janice could pitch in with the chores around the house, which was a significant consideration in their Asian family culture. It wasn't uncommon for children to share the responsibility of washing dishes, cleaning, and cooking. With one more set of hands to help, the family would run more smoothly. Gwen's parents weren't exactly rolling in money, but they believed in teaching responsibility. The kids had chores, had to keep their grades up, and attended church every Sunday. They were strict, but it was out of love. Gwen and Lewis respected that. In 2021, Janice moved in, and it was like she was instantly part of the family. The Maguad welcomed her with open arms. Lewis even gave up his own room so Janice could have a more comfortable one. They enrolled her in school right away, and for the first time, Janice didn't have to wake up with the constant worry of finding food or going to work. She was finally allowed to be a kid. As Janice settled into her new life, the bond between the three siblings grew stronger by the day. We could see the happiness shining through, especially in the videos they posted on TikTok. Janice even got to experience a family vacation for the first time, something she had always dreamed of. Laughter filled the air as they explored new places together, creating memories she would cherish forever. For once, Janice felt like she belonged to something bigger, something safe and full of love. But just when everything seemed perfect, Janice's world was about to shatter. On December 10th of that same year, she posted a series of statuses on Facebook claiming that she and her siblings were under attack. It was just days before Christmas, a time that should have been filled with joy. Instead, it marked the beginning of a nightmare. At that time, Mr. Cruz, their father, was at school doing some chores related to the upcoming holiday, while Lovella, their mother, was away on a work trip. Everything changed when Mr. Cruz received a phone call that left him frozen in terror. The voice on the other end told him that their home was being ransacked and his children were inside. By 3:15 in the afternoon, Cruz finally arrived at the house. It was eerily silent outside the front door. His eyes locked onto a blood-soaked blanket on the ground with a knife nearby. He called out for his kids, but there was no response. He moved quickly to the back door and managed to find a way inside. Cruz moved rapidly through the house, his voice echoing off the walls as he searched for his children. When he entered the living room, that a horrifying sight met his eyes. There, lying on the floor, was his daughter Gwyn. A towel soaked in blood was wrapped around her body, her limbs and torso were covered in multiple slash wounds. But it was the injuries on her neck that were particularly severe. Crime scene photos later revealed the gruesome extent of the wounds. Her flesh was torn apart, and ants had already begun to gather on her body. Not far from Gwyn, near the main door, Cruz found Louis. His hands and feet were bound, and a gag covered his mouth. His body was riddled with fresh stab wounds, and the amount of blood suggested that the attack had happened just moments before Cruz arrived. But there was one more person missing. Janice's heart pounded as Cruz continued to search the house, calling her name. Finally, Janice appeared. She emerged from her room, her hair wet and her face pale and shaken. She was in shock, barely able to speak. Seeing her, Cruz immediately called the police. The officers arrived soon after, stepping into a crime scene that would later be described as one of the most gruesome in the Philippines. Blood pooled on the floor, and the house bore the marks of extreme violence. Janice, while trembling, told the officers that they had been attacked. The house was in disarray, cabinets had been pried open and personal belongings were scattered across the rooms. At first glance, it seemed like a robbery. However, investigators knew that appearances could be deceiving. They needed to confirm whether anything valuable had been taken to solidify the robbery theory. At the same time, as part of their protocol, the police did not rule out the parents as persons of interest. The police needed to confirm their alibis and whereabouts during the attack. The investigators turned their attention to the room where Janice said she was hiding during the attack. It was messy, but that wasn't unusual for a robbery scene. What stood out, though, were the details that didn't add up. The disarray in the room, though chaotic, didn't have the usual signs of a real robbery. So the police began to search the house more carefully, and they soon found some crucial evidence just outside the front door. The police discovered a blood-stained shirt, which they believed had been dropped by the attacker while trying to escape. About 100 meters away, they found a plastic bag in a ditch. Inside were bloody pants and underwear. It seemed the attacker had deliberately discarded these items to hide evidence. Inside the house, the scene became increasingly horrifying. The living room floor was littered with shards of glass and broken bottles, a clear sign of the violence that had unfolded there. Expansive pools of blood reveal the brutal nature of the attack. Among the carnage, investigators discovered a discarded knife, a baseball bat, and a hammer, each stained with blood. These weapons were assumed to have been used in the murders. Crime scene analysts took careful note of the blood patterns, which provided key insights into the sequence of events. They determined that Gwyn, the older sibling, had likely been killed first. Her blood had partially coagulated and rigor mortis had already begun to set in. In contrast, Louis's blood appeared much fresher, suggesting he had been murdered after Gwyn. The different states of the blood and bodies made this theory even more plausible. Louis's hands and feet were bound, while Gwyn's were not. This discrepancy indicated that Gwyn might have been ambushed and killed quickly, while Louis was restrained, likely to prevent him from resisting before his own murder. The fact that so many different tools were used and that the victims had distinctive types of wounds strongly suggested the involvement of more than one attacker. This theory was supported by the fact that Louis had been restrained. It would have been difficult for a single person to control a victim while also carrying out such a brutal attack. Adding to the mystery, Cruz confirmed that the weapons found at the scene were his. The murderers seemed to have used tools that were readily available in the house, which made the crime even more unsettling. As investigators continued to gather evidence, they found something that stood out. The family's laundry machine had been used, but there were no freshly washed clothes anywhere in the house. This odd discovery suggested that something unusual had happened after the crime, perhaps an attempt to erase evidence or cover their tracks. The extreme brutality of the crime prompted local authorities to launch a manhunt for the suspects. The public was shocked, and the need for justice became urgent. To help with the investigation, the vice of the Municipal Council of Mlang, North Cotabato announced a reward of 200,000 pesos for any information leading to the capture of the perpetrators. The mayor also offered an additional 50,000 pesos as a bounty. These actions emphasized the gravity of the case and the community's desperate need for answers. Autopsies were performed on Gwyn and Lewis over 2 days, starting on December 13, 2021, and the results were chilling. Gwyn had sustained 32 stab and slash wounds, some of which were deep enough to almost sever her limbs. One of her ears had been cut off, and her neck and upper arm were nearly severed. Her body also showed signs of blunt force trauma, likely caused by the hammer and baseball bat found at the scene. Additionally, the backs of her hands were bruised, covered in defensive wounds, indicating that she had fought fiercely. Meanwhile, Lewis had endured 51 knife wounds, some so deep that they exposed his bones and internal organs. Red marks on his neck suggested he may have been strangled. Unlike his sister, Lewis had no defensive wounds. He also had signs of blunt force trauma on his limbs and torso. All these injuries were consistent with the weapons recovered at the scene. Investigators quickly ruled out the possibility of a robbery gone wrong. Though the rooms appeared ransacked, only Gwyn's phone was missing. Nothing else of value had been taken, leading authorities to believe that the killer or killers were familiar with the victims. It was also striking that the crime took place in broad daylight, which made the entire situation even more unsettling. Before the autopsy results were made public, rumors began circulating online accusing Janice of being involved in the crime. These rumors gained traction due to her survival, the weapons being from the family home, and the locked front door. The accusations grew increasingly intense, with some even threatening Janice. Under the mounting pressure, the police decided to question her. Janice described the events of that day. She had been studying with Gwyn in her bedroom while Lewis was downstairs in the living room. Suddenly, they heard screams, and 3 men broke into the house. The 2 girls rushed downstairs and saw the 3 men attacking Lewis with the weapons found at the scene. The attackers then turned on Gwyn. In fear, Janice fled upstairs, locked herself in her bedroom, and hid under the bed. Janice was too scared to call the police, so instead, she texted the family group chat asking for help. Later, she messaged her adoptive mom saying, "Mom, help." When no one saw those messages, Janice went a step further and posted on social media, saying, "Help. Somebody has broken into the house. I don't want to die. I'm hiding in my room. Help." After a few minutes, she deleted the post, worried the attackers might see it and come after her. By the time someone saw the post and reached out to her mom, Janice was too scared to pick up. She even changed her social media username and put her phone on silent, clearly trying to hide. When the house finally fell silent, Janice emerged from her hiding place, too afraid to go downstairs. She claimed she took a shower and changed clothes to calm herself, finishing just as Cruz arrived home. However, there was something odd about this part of the story. Janice had told the police she locked herself in her bedroom the moment the attack began, so why did her room look like it had been ransacked? That raised serious questions. More importantly, Janice's version of events was directly at odds with the forensic evidence. The autopsy results and the way the injuries were distributed made it clear that Gwyn was the first victim, not Lewis. This major discrepancy between Janice's account and the evidence made investigators even more suspicious. Something wasn't adding up, and they started to take a closer look at Janice's statements. At first, she told the police her phone was off during the attack, but Cruz remembered calling her phone and hearing it ring with no answer. When Janice was confronted with this, she changed her story again, now claiming that she had been in the shower and hadn't heard her phone ringing. This was starting to sound suspicious. But that wasn't the only thing that raised eyebrows. Cruz also revealed some information about the murder weapons that added fuel to the fire. The baseball bat used in the attack originally belonged to Lewis. He had kept it in his room on the top bunk as a kind of protection. However, after being adopted by Cruz, Janice had taken over the top bunk. The hammer used in the attack was another tool that Cruz kept around for home repairs. He was very careful about where he stored it, usually hiding it behind the washing machine. Cruz mentioned that only 3 people knew exactly where that hammer was: himself, Gwyn, and Janice. This meant that the killer or killers had to have known the family's routines and possessions very well, almost as if they had been living in the house with them. Things became even more suspicious when a delivery driver came forward. The driver had arrived at the house just 18 minutes before Cruz was contacted by a neighbor who noticed that no one had answered the door. The driver kept calling out, hoping someone would respond. Eventually, he noticed a woman peering at him through a door before she suddenly walked away. The woman's identity was never confirmed, but it raised serious doubts about where Janice was and what she was doing during the attack. At the crime scene, it had been locked from the inside, and there were no signs of forced entry. This was significant because it meant that whoever had done this was likely someone familiar with the house, someone who had access to a key and could lock the door after the crime. At this point, it was pretty clear that Janice had something to do with the murders. However, since Janice was only 17 years old, still a minor. Under Philippine law, the police couldn't arrest her without solid proof. This legal issue made them tread carefully, as they couldn't move forward with an arrest until they had more definitive evidence. Rather than arresting her immediately, the authorities placed Janice under the care of the Social Welfare Department while they investigated who had actually committed the murders. If Janice's claim about other people being involved was true, the police had a considerable amount of work ahead of them. 5 days after the murders, a significant breakthrough occurred. The police discovered Janice's fingerprints on the murder weapons. This was a huge deal, but it wasn't the smoking gun. After all, Janice had lived in the house where the weapons were stored, so her prints could have been there simply from handling them. Still, it was a lead they couldn't ignore. To ensure she wasn't treated unfairly, Janice was given a lawyer by the Social Welfare Department. However, things took another unexpected turn when Lovella, Janice's adoptive mother, found a contact tracing form while searching Janice's room for clues. To her surprise, it wasn't Janice's form. It belonged to a 17-year-old boy named Esmeraldo Aldo Cano Jr. Aldo was a sacristan at a local church, and Janice had known him from the orphanage. This discovery sent the police scrambling to determine if Aldo had anything to do with the murders. Soon enough, witnesses came forward confirming that Aldo had been near the crime scene on the day of the killings. One woman stated she saw Aldo drop Janice off near the house right before the murders, and another neighbor said she saw him asking for directions to the house that morning. When shown a picture of Aldo, the woman immediately recognized him. Then, on December 16th, 6 days after the murder, Janice, with her lawyer present, gave a full confession. She admitted to being involved in the murders along with Aldo. Janice explained that her motive stemmed from deep resentment and jealousy. She felt that Gwyn and Lewis were receiving all the love and attention from their parents. In her mind, they were standing in the way of her getting the affection she had longed for. She even confessed that killing them would leave her as the only child in the family, guaranteeing that she would get all the love and attention she had recently started receiving after being adopted. Janice revealed that her ultimate goal was to take Gwyn's place in the family, driven by years of emotional neglect in the orphanage where she had grown up. By December 18th, Janice's confession was officially recorded, although it was inconsistent, much like many of her previous statements. The police tracked down Aldo, who voluntarily surrendered, admitting his role as well. Forensic analysis later confirmed that blood found on discarded clothing in a ditch belonged to Aldo. Like Janice, Aldo was also a minor, so he was placed under the care of the Social Welfare Department. Later that same day, in an unrelated banned substance raid, police arrested a 17-year-old for possession of illegal substances. When they searched his phone, they found something that tied him to the case: Gwyn's stolen cell phone. The serial number confirmed it had been taken after the murders. The police pieced it together. Janice had enlisted Aldo to sell the phone because she couldn't get rid of it herself. Unfortunately, the phone had been damaged, making it impossible to retrieve any useful data. The boy who had the phone wasn't involved in the murders, he had simply bought it from Aldo. Because Janice and Aldo were minors, the police couldn't release any juicy details about their confessions to the public, despite the parents pressing for information. As the investigation progressed, Janice stopped cooperating, making it even harder to figure out exactly what had happened. Some people believe Janice's confessions weren't even the full story. Whispers circulated that the murders were even worse than she had let on, like the possibility that Louis was tied up and forced to watch as his sister was murdered before he was killed as well. After the shocking confessions, Lovella, the siblings' mother, was interviewed and reflected on the warning signs she had missed. According to Lovella, they had adopted Janice 5 months before the murders. At first, everything seemed fine, the family welcomed her, and she appeared grateful. However, soon small red flags began to show. In August 2021, when Gwyn's parents were hospitalized, Cruz noticed that 10,000 pesos, about $170, set aside for emergencies was missing. Janice claimed thieves had taken it, but the next day a large sum was found hidden in her school bag. After some questioning, Janice admitted she had taken the money. Despite this breach of trust, the family, particularly Gwyn, chose to forgive her. They were sympathetic to her troubled past, attributing the theft to the survival instinct she had developed after years of hardship. Janice apologized, and the family, hoping this was a one-time mistake. They accepted her apology, believing the worst was behind them. However, as months passed, Janice's behavior started to shift in unsettling ways. She became lazy, irresponsible, neglecting household chores and showing a disregard for reminders. She apologized but never followed through. Although troubling, it didn't raise any immediate alarms until the morning of the murders. On that day, Janice did something she had never done before. She called Cruz and Lovella mom and dad for the first time. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a red flag, indicating a deeper, darker shift in her emotional state. It was as if something had clicked in her mind, setting in motion what was about to happen. As the investigation unfolded, more shocking truths came to light. Janice had lied about her origins from the start. Her story of being an orphan was a fabrication. Her parents were alive and had spent years desperately searching for her. When the case went viral, Filipino amateur sleuths dug into her past and uncovered a nearly decade-old missing persons notice. Her parents weren't very active on Facebook back then, so they missed the post. Fast forward to the murders, and that same post started circulating online again. It didn't take long for Janice's biological parents to recognize her. Born in 2005, Janice was the youngest of 3 children, but her childhood was filled with chaos. Her father's gambling addiction tore the family apart, and after remarrying, her mother tried to make the best of the situation by dividing what little they had left among her children. Eventually, Janice and her siblings were placed in different orphanages. By 2020, Janice had actually reunited with her biological family, but that reunion didn't last long. Her relatives later claimed she cut them off, saying they were too poor to be of any use to her. This betrayal shocked everyone. Things took a darker turn when Janice's biological mother, devastated by what her daughter had done, attended the funeral of Gwyn and Louis. In her grief, she kept apologizing, overwhelmed with guilt about her daughter's actions. In one heartbreaking moment, Janice's biological mother even knelt down, but the Maguad weren't seeking revenge. They made it clear that they weren't angry, only seeking justice. They insisted that Janice's biological mother encourage her daughter to confess. Janice's mother tried to visit Janice at the social welfare office, but Janice refused to see her, citing strict rules. Then, the investigation took a jaw-dropping turn when evidence surfaced suggesting the murders were premeditated. Screenshots of a conversation between Janice and an unknown person went viral. In the messages, Janice confessed that she wanted to kill her siblings, thinking their deaths would give her the freedom she craved. She even wondered if anyone would still accept her if she committed murder, expressing a chilling belief that no matter what she did, God would forgive her if she asked. Some sources claim that Janice often talked about the 2009 horror movie The Orphan, a film about a young girl adopted by a family who ultimately betrays and kills them. She even posted on Facebook that she loved the movie and watched it repeatedly. When Janice's trial began, her behavior was just as disturbing. She was seen smiling and laughing in court, showing no remorse or regret. Cruz and Lovella, devastated by the loss of their children, said in interviews that they might have forgiven Janice if she had shown even a hint of genuine remorse, but her coldness only deepened their pain. The case became a national sensation in the Philippines. From March 2022, when Janice and Esmeralda were officially charged with murder, to their conviction on May 17, 2022, the case was closely followed by the public. Janice Sibiel was sentenced to 31 years in prison, while Esmeralda Aldo Cano Jr. received a 29-year sentence. However, both sentences came with one condition: they would serve them under the supervision of the Department of Social Welfare and Development until their 21st birthdays, after which they would be transferred to adult prisons. Gwyn and Lewis's parents had mixed feelings about the trial's outcome. While they recognized that the courts handed down the toughest punishment possible under the law, they felt the laws were too soft. The biggest issue, however, was Janice's complete lack of remorse. Cruz and Lovella were outspoken against Republic Act 9344, which limits the legal accountability of minors. According to this law, the minimum age for criminal liability is 15, and individuals between the ages of 15 and 18 can be held accountable but are sent to youth centers or rehab programs instead of adult prisons. This law prevents minors like Janice from being tried as adults, even for heinous crimes. Many argued that kids shouldn't be capable of planning or committing such brutal acts. In the US and other countries, minors committing these kinds of crimes would have been tried as adults. Cruz and Lovella felt strongly that Janice's age shouldn't excuse her from taking full responsibility, especially for such a violent and premeditated crime. This view was shared by many who felt the law was too lenient in cases like this. They publicly called for changes to the law, wanting those who commit violent acts at a young age to be held fully accountable. Some of the most heartbreaking facts to come out of the investigation revealed that Gwyn almost escaped. She had the chance to run, but when she heard Lewis calling for help, she went back, hoping to save her brother. Lori K. Soares Hacking was born on December 31, 1976, and was adopted by Thelma and Iraldo Soares. They formerly lived in Fullerton, California. Iraldo is a Spanish and Portuguese teacher at Sunny Hills High School and a native of Piracicaba, Brazil. He met Thelma while they were both serving as missionaries for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Rio de Janeiro. Lori's parents divorced in 1987. Thelma and Lori moved to Orem, Utah the following year. In Orem, she attended Orem High School, where she was known for her organizational skills, determination, and vibrant personality. During high school, Lori met Mark Douglas Hacking. Their relationship quickly grew. They became a well-known couple, attending all the homecoming dances and proms together, appearing just like any other young couple in love. Mark, who was helpful and reliable, often spent time at Lori's house, assisting with errands, home repairs. This earned him a special place in Lori's family's hearts. Lori's brother jokingly felt jealous, as Mark received more attention from their mother and Lori than he did. However, Lori's family genuinely appreciated Mark's kindness and support. Lori and Mark's youthful romance blossomed into a strong relationship, leading to their marriage on August 7, 1999. By 2004, Lori was working as an assistant manager at a financial institution, while Mark, who had just graduated from the University of Utah, was preparing to start medical school at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Mark's decision to pursue medicine was expected, as he came from a well-educated family with several doctors, including his father and brothers, while another brother worked in government. In the summer of 2004, Lori and Mark planned to move to North Carolina. Lori, who was pregnant, was excited about the relocation, as was her mother, Thelma, who was eager to become a grandmother. Velma hoped for a granddaughter with big curls like Lori's. On July 19, 2004, Lori, who was 27 years old and 5 months pregnant, suddenly disappeared. At around 5:15 a.m., she went for her usual jog at Memory Grove Park and City Creek Canyon before heading to work in Salt Lake City. When she did not return that afternoon, her boss contacted Mark. Concerned for her safety, Mark quickly called the police to report her missing. Mark arrived at Memory Grove Park at 10:07 a.m., aware that it was the last place Lori was supposed to be. He found her car in the parking lot, but the park was unusually quiet, making his heart race with fear. Patrol officers greeted him outside the park and updated detectives on Lori's disappearance. They feared the worst, thinking she might have fallen into the canyon, gotten injured, and become trapped in the thick woods. Given the situation, the patrol officers believed it was essential to involve homicide detectives. The steep canyon walls heightened their concern, as they worried that the pregnant woman might have been hurt and needed urgent help. Lori Hacking's mysterious disappearance shocked the community, leading to a flood of support from friends and family. Her husband, Mark Hacking, was visibly distraught as he appealed for help in locating his missing wife. His public requests for assistance caught the attention of various media outlets, and he eagerly spoke to any reporter asking about Lori, expressing his deep worry and asking for help in the search. Officers from the Salt Lake City Police Department are actively investigating the case and have organized a large-scale search at Memory Grove Park. They are seeking the help of at least 3,000 volunteers to assist in searching for Lori or any evidence that she may have been present in the area. Many homes are located along the path leading to Memory Grove Park, where Lori was reportedly last seen. The officers are thoroughly canvassing the area, looking for anyone who might have witnessed something unusual. Lori is easily recognizable with her distinctive bushy dark curls, and the officers believe residents would likely remember her. Their hopes were momentarily lifted when a woman claimed to have seen Lori near Memory Grove that morning, but she later retracted her statement. As the search for Lori continued, the Salt Lake City Police Department established a command post near the entrance of the park. Mark's brothers and Lori's mother arrived at the scene. One of Mark's brothers suggested checking a homeless encampment in the canyon, voicing concerns about the potential involvement of those living there in Lori's disappearance. The detectives understood the importance of exploring all avenues and decided to investigate the encampment. There are no suspicious signs here. They realized that uncovering the truth would be challenging and that every detail needed thorough examination. Detectives arrived at Mark and Lori Hacking's home. They were already aware that in many missing persons cases, the partner is often the primary suspect. They also considered the possibility that Lori might have had a romantic relationship with someone else, which could have played a role in her disappearance. The detectives asked Mark for permission to enter their apartment and to obtain a recent photograph of Lori for their missing person flyer. Mark agreed, allowing them to enter the apartment. After entering the residence, the detectives asked Mark for permission to do a quick search, which he agreed to. During the search, one detective found a red handbag that belonged to Lori. Inside the handbag was Lori's wallet, complete with her identification and credit cards. The detectives were puzzled as to why Lori would go to Memory Grove Park for exercise, leaving her car near the entrance but not taking her purse with her. Additionally, the detective spotted a large bouquet of flowers on the kitchen counter, which led her to believe that Mark had bought them for Lori as an apology. This detail raised her suspicion about potential issues in their marriage, as she recalled that husbands often give large bouquets to express remorse. While investigating the bathroom, the detective noted that it was exceptionally clean and had a strong smell of bleach, suggesting someone had recently scrubbed it with disinfectant. This finding intrigued the detective, as it indicated an effort to hide something. In the bedroom, she observed a set of sheets on the bed that looked brand new, with visible creases and no signs of having been washed. When she checked Lori's jewelry box, she noticed that Lori's wedding band was missing, which struck her as odd. The detective wondered why a happily married woman would not be wearing her wedding ring. Mark met YTH, a detective at the police department, for an interview. The detective asked him questions about his marriage, and Mark claimed that everything was fine. Given the growing evidence and suspicions against him, this statement seemed questionable. Mark mentioned that he and Lori were packing to move to North Carolina, where he would soon start medical school. This information caught the detective's attention, and she became curious about his intended specialty. When she asked, Mark surprised her by saying he would specialize in oncology. As the interview progressed, the detective closely observed Mark's behavior. He seemed to be crying, but they never saw any tears, which made them suspicious and led them to believe that he might be pretending. They felt deep inside that something terrible had happened to Lori, suspected Mark was involved, but they still hoped Lori was alive and could be saved. The detectives asked Mark for permission to search his red truck. While they searched the vehicle, Mark was present. On the seat, the detective found a receipt from a mattress company dated the same day Lori went missing. This raised questions. Why would Mark buy a new mattress on the day his pregnant wife disappeared? Determined to find more evidence, they returned to Mark's apartment and asked for his signature on a consent form that would allow a more thorough search. Mark agreed, giving the detectives permission to enter his home. Once inside, the detective confronted him with a receipt they had found. They also noticed a new mattress on Mark and Lori's bed. This finding prompted further questioning. The detective asked Mark about the mismatched mattress and box spring, suggesting it had been bought recently. Mark's reaction indicated that this struck a nerve. While continuing their search, the detectives made another discovery that heightened their suspicions. They found several knives on the nightstand next to Mark's bed. One knife was hidden in a sheath, and when they examined it, they noticed red stains on the blade, which they suspected were human blood. When questioned about it, Mark claimed he used the knife for hunting. When the detective found the knife, they stopped the consensual search of the house and called in a crime scene investigation team. They started working on getting a search warrant because they believed something serious had happened in Lori's home. While checking the area, detectives noticed a trash can in the parking lot, leading them to suspect that Mark had killed his wife and dumped her body in the trash. Around the same time, the night watch officer informed the police investigating Lori's disappearance that Mark had been seen running around naked at a local motel. This incident increased suspicions about Mark's involvement and added to the evidence suggesting he played a role in Lori's disappearance. When an officer arrived at the motel, he found Mark behaving oddly and completely naked. However, the officer observed that Mark had the presence of mind to put on his shoes before running around the parking lot, which made the officer suspect that Mark was pretending to act strangely. A person in an abnormal state would not even realize they were walking barefoot. That afternoon, a detective visited Mark at the hospital and was surprised to see that he showed no signs of emotional distress. Instead, he appeared relaxed and content, enjoying pizza and watching television. The detective began the interview by asking the same questions as before. Mark maintained that Lori had never returned home from her morning jog. During the interview, Douglas Hacking, Mark's father, was present and urged him to be truthful if he had done something wrong. However, Mark looked back at his father with a determined expression, insisting that he had not done anything. Douglas was confident in his son's honesty and believed him. While the investigation into Lori's disappearance was ongoing, detectives received information from officials at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. They informed the detectives that Mark Hacking, who was supposed to start an oncology program there, was not enrolled and that they had no record of him. They presented this information to Thelma, Lori's mother, hoping to clarify Mark's true intentions. Initially, Thelma refused to accept the detectives' claims, perceiving them as mere speculation. However, her disbelief wavered when the detectives revealed that Mark had never graduated from the University of Utah. This shocking revelation made Thelma reconsider past events, and she recalled signs that something was off. At Mark's supposed graduation ceremony, she remembered hearing him sick in the bathroom, which prevented him from attending the event. They believed that Mark's deception had finally caught up with him, which might have contributed to Lori's disappearance. On July 20, 2004, one day after Lori went missing, a store clerk from a nearby shop reported an important detail to the detectives. The clerk recalled that on the evening of July 18 at 9:45 p.m., Lori and Mark entered the store and bought a soda. The detectives reviewed the store's CCTV footage from that time and confirmed the clerk's story. The video showed Lori wearing green scrub-style pants and a tan shirt, along with Mark as they entered the store. This was believed to be the last confirmed sighting of Lori alive. The search for Lori lasted 3 days and involved hundreds of volunteers. Her mother, Velma, made a heartfelt appeal to the public, urging anyone who might have Lori to release her, emphasizing the extreme heat in the canyon, which often exceeded 100 degrees in July. Despite the challenging conditions, the search efforts remained strong. Meanwhile, Mark was in the hospital recovering from a mental health crisis. His brothers, Scott and Lance, growing suspicious of his potential involvement in Lori's disappearance, confronted him again. On July 24, 2004, Mark eventually confessed to killing Lori. He explained that she had found out he was not actually a graduate of the University of Utah, where he claimed to be attending medical school in North Carolina. This revelation devastated Lori, making her feel betrayed. Before she could file for divorce, Mark took drastic action by shooting her and disposing of her body in a dumpster. After Mark admitted to his brothers, the search for Lori in the canyon shifted to the landfill. Nearly 30 officers were sent to the 10-acre landfill to search for her body. In the 2 days following the disposal, they had to sift through a massive amount of waste. First-degree murder charges were filed against Mark on August 9, 2004. The search for Lori was extensive and physically challenging, especially with the high temperatures. Many agencies and professionals worked together in this effort. They used cadaver dogs and equipment like earth movers to help find any evidence. These tools were essential in narrowing down the search area and uncovering important leads. On October 1, 2004, at 8:20 a.m., human remains were discovered in the landfill. This was a major breakthrough in the case, bringing hope for answers regarding Lori's disappearance. The remains were carefully examined and identified using dental records, confirming that they belonged to Lori. This information provided a clear conclusion to the search, offering some closure for her family. On April 15, 2005, Lori's husband, Mark, pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. He was sentenced on June 6, 2005, to 6 years to life in prison. The Utah State Board of Pardons later stated that he would not be eligible for parole until 2035. That means will face a minimum of 30 years in prison. Board Chairman Mike Sibbett emphasized that the hearing does not guarantee a release date. He stated that there were several aggravating factors in Hacking's case that merited a stay. He emphasized that Hacking obstructed justice by disposing of Lori's body and falsely claiming she was missing. In honor of Lori, her family chose to remove Mark Hacking's last name from her headstone. This decision aimed to celebrate Lori's memory and assert her independence in light of Mark's actions, emphasizing her individuality and the strength she showed throughout her life. A year after Mark was convicted of murdering his wife, Lori, it was revealed that he had been involved in illegal activities while in the Central Utah Correctional Facility in Gunnison, Utah. He was found to be selling personal items, such as autographed memorabilia and other prison-related items, on a website called Murder Auction. Initially, Mark denied the allegations, but later, after an investigation, he agreed to stop his online sales. This revelation caused public outrage and raised new concerns about the integrity of the prison system. Being gullible can be dangerous, sometimes even life-threatening. We all have moments when we wish to believe in miracles, feel that dreams might still be within reach. When something you've wished for seems almost attainable, it's easy to let caution and common sense slip away. Criminals often take advantage of this vulnerability. The case of Elodie Morel, a young French woman, in 2005 shocked the nation due to its brutality and inhumanity. What made it even more disturbing was the indifference shown by ordinary people who were aware of her situation but chose to remain silent for their own gain. This story reminds us that not all dreams come true and highlights the importance of being cautious about whom you trust, especially when they promise a fairy tale ending. Elodie Morel was born on 1976, in Marseille. From a young age, she had a strikingly beautiful appearance. As she grew older, Elodie developed into an even more stunning woman, with many people believing she should be on television or magazine covers. As a teenager, she dreamed of being a model, but coming from a modest background, few took her aspirations seriously. In the 1990s, Elodie submitted her photos to various modeling agencies several times but never received any replies. After finishing high school, she attended college, married a classmate named Sylvain at 22, and had a son by 25. It appeared she had abandoned her modeling dreams permanently. By 2005, Elodie worked as a sales associate at a trendy clothing store in downtown Marseille. She often received compliments and noticed people admiring or envying her looks. At 29, she maintained a perfect figure and beautiful features, easily appearing to be in her early 20s. Though Elodie never completely gave up on her modeling aspirations, she stopped discussing them, believing her time had passed. In April 2005, Elodie filled out an online application, submitted her best photos, and expressed her desire to pursue a modeling career. She soon received a reply, but what seemed like a promising opportunity from a fashion photographer turned out to be a dangerous trap. About 2 weeks after posting her profile, Elodie received an enticing offer to become the new face of the prestigious English luxury car company, Rolls-Royce. The contract promised €1,000 per day for a photo shoot, but to secure the deal, she needed to meet the photographer for a test shoot. The meeting was scheduled for May 2nd at a bar in Aigues-Mortes. Excited, Elodie shared the news with her husband, who was doubtful but didn't voice his concerns. That morning, she left her son with her parents, got into her car, and drove to the meeting location. She planned to stay in Aigues-Mortes for 3 days and had already booked a hotel room. Later that evening, Elodie called her husband to update him on her progress and mentioned she was feeling nervous. Sylvain wished her luck, told her to call him as soon as she could. This would be the last conversation he had with his wife. When Elodie arrived at the bar as planned, she sat at a table on the terrace, waiting to meet the female photographer she believed she had been emailing. However, about 10 minutes later, a man in his mid-40s approached her. He introduced himself as the photographer's assistant, explained that he was there to meet her and scout locations for the photo shoot scheduled for the next day. Since Elodie had little experience in the modeling industry, she didn't find anything suspicious about him, took him at his word. The man appeared professional, spoke confidently, and seemed knowledgeable about her prior conversations with the photographer. Their conversation flowed easily and revolved around Elodie's potential career. She began to imagine herself on the covers of popular magazines, daydreamed about how she would spend the money she would earn. Around 9 p.m., as night fell, the man proposed they look for the ideal spot for the next day's photo shoot. Aigues-Mortes, a beautiful medieval town, is filled with scenic towers, fortresses, and chapels, perfect locations for taking stunning pictures. Excited and unaware of any danger, Elodie left the bar with her new acquaintance and got into his car. Tragically, she was never seen alive again. What is particularly unsettling is that a man who knew the suspect and was aware of his malicious intentions witnessed the entire encounter. He tried to step in, but his efforts were futile. That same night, on May 2nd, a call came into the Aigues-Mortes police station. A panicked man reported that a young woman was in serious danger and that immediate action was needed. He did not know the victim's name or her location, but he was convinced time was running out. The caller was 63-year-old Dominique Tarasco, a nightclub owner who frequently provided the police with confidential information. He stated that earlier that night, he had seen his acquaintance, Guillaume Mingod, at the bar. Guillaume had connections to the criminal underworld and was notorious for his violent behavior. The day before, he had boasted about meeting a naive, attractive girl online whom he intended to abduct and sell to a brothel in Spain for a substantial profit. Starting the search for Elodie Morel was challenging because the police had no solid leads, names, or locations. They knew that finding her quickly was crucial. By the next morning, they learned her name when her worried family reached out, reporting that she had been missing since the previous evening and that her phone was turned off. They explained that she had left for a photo shoot in another town and then disappeared. Initially, the police did not link her disappearance to the family's report. They thought she might have run away with a romantic partner. However, her family stressed that she would never leave her young son or vanish without a message. The search for Elodie did not officially start until 3 days after she went missing, which wasted valuable time. Tragically, during those 2 days, Elodie was still alive, being held captive in a house in Vergès where she suffered torture and abuse as her captors decided what to do with her. On May 5, 2005, the lead investigator in Aigues-Mortes' missing person case began to suspect that she was the endangered woman mentioned by an informant. Dominique Tarasco was called to the police station to provide a formal statement. When shown a photo of Elodie, he immediately confirmed that she was the woman he had seen 3 days earlier in a bar with Guillaume. When asked where he thought Guillaume might have taken Elodie, Dominique recalled hearing about an empty nightclub on the north side of town that had recently closed down. A police team conducted a surveillance operation at that location, and by that evening, they arrested 48-year-old Guillaume and 53-year-old Richard as they arrived at the nightclub. The exact role of Richard in this case remained unclear and needed further investigation. During a search of Guillaume, police discovered Elodie Morel's credit card in one of Guillaume's pockets, which confirmed his involvement in her disappearance. Both men were taken to the station for questioning, but Richard was released a few hours later due to insufficient evidence against him. Richard lived with his family on the outskirts of town and had a friendly relationship with Guillaume, but he had no prior legal issues. Guillaume initially claimed he didn't know Elodie and that he had just stolen her credit card. In his first account, he said that on May 2nd, while at a bar, he spotted an attractive, well-dressed woman and assumed she had money. He decided to rob her. Guillaume approached Elodie's table, gave her a compliment, and offered to buy her a coffee. Although she stated she was waiting for someone, she didn't tell him to leave. They engaged in a brief conversation, during which he managed to take her credit card from her purse that was hanging on her chair, leaving before she realized it was gone. Guillaume insisted that the entire incident was spontaneous. He claimed he only stole her card and had no involvement in her disappearance. Investigators found that he used the stolen card the same day to withdraw cash from an ATM located on the outskirts of town. However, he could not explain how he knew the PIN, which made his story seem unreliable. Additionally, a background check revealed that Guillaume had a criminal history with multiple convictions, including armed robbery, banned substance trafficking, and a 9-year prison sentence for a violent abuse. Despite being released from prison, Guillaume had not changed his behavior. Instead, he had become more cautious to avoid returning to jail. The situation worsened for Guillaume when police discovered Elodie's phone number in his phone, along with their email exchanges regarding a photo shoot. This evidence contradicted his initial account and forced him to change his story. He admitted that he found Elodie's modeling profile online and began messaging her while pretending to be a photographer. Elodie, being trusting and eager, quickly agreed to meet him without much skepticism. Guillaume had been using a female alias to communicate with her, which made him nervous that she might become suspicious when a man showed up instead of the expected photographer. Nevertheless, Elodie saw nothing unusual and willingly went with him late at night to check out possible locations for the photo shoot, even getting into his car without hesitation, a fact later confirmed by witnesses. After driving to a remote location, Guillaume left the main road and stopped the car. He pulled out a gun and demanded that Elodie give him her credit card. When she refused, he took her purse and found the card himself. He then insisted on getting the PIN, but Elodie still wouldn't provide it. Angered, he slammed her head against the dashboard, choked her until she finally gave in and revealed the code. After that, he locked Elodie in the trunk and went to the nearest ATM to check if she was telling the truth. The PIN worked, and he emptied her account. With the money in his possession, he started thinking about what to do next with the woman locked in his trunk. Feeling the need for time to figure things out, Guillaume drove to his friend Richard's house to hide Elodie for a while. He told Richard about the woman in his trunk, mentioned that he planned to sell her for a significant profit, which he was willing to share with Richard. It's worth noting that Richard and his wife once worked at the same nightclub. He is a security guard and she is a cleaner. After the nightclub closed, they both lost their jobs and were struggling to get by, leading Richard to begin drinking heavily. Richard agreed to help Guillaume by giving him the keys to his empty garage, suggesting it as a place to keep the woman. He wanted to avoid any direct interaction with her and preferred to let Guillaume handle things, hoping to receive a share of the money. Later investigations found that Elodie had been held captive for more than 2 days, during which she suffered severe torture, assault, beatings, and severe hunger and thirst. Guillaume reported that he and Elodie spent a lot of time talking about their children, who were of similar ages. Elodie pleaded for her release, arguing that her son needed her. Guillaume admitted that he felt some sympathy for her and briefly considered letting her go. He even brought her a bottle of water because the garage was extremely hot and she had been there for 2 days. However, on the night of May 4th, everything changed when Richard, heavily intoxicated, decided to confront Elodie. Guillaume claimed that while he was away, Richard entered the garage and strangled Elodie with a rope. Guillaume maintained that he did not take part in the actual murder and only helped to hide her body. However, he would not disclose the location of her remains. During the police search of the Lignier residence, they seemed nervous but not particularly shocked. They allowed the officers to enter without resistance and continued eating at the kitchen table, showing little concern for the search. The police discovered several items belonging to Elodie in their teenage daughter's room, such as her cell phone, jewelry, a hair clip, and a wristwatch. Additionally, Elodie's purse and wallet were found with Richard's wife. Other items, including torn pieces of the victim's clothing, were found in the trash bin outside the house. More alarming evidence was revealed in Richard's garage. Investigators found dried brown stains that looked like blood, along with crumpled tissues, cigarette butts, an empty plastic bottle, and a piece of rope. Both Richard and his wife, Francine, were arrested, while their 14-year-old daughter was temporarily placed with relatives. When asked how Elodie's belongings came to be in their home, they explained that Guillaume had brought them in exchange for using their garage. They acknowledged knowing that he was holding a woman there but chose not to intervene because he had promised to reward them. They also admitted to giving him a bottle of water and a piece of rope when he asked, without questioning his motives. Forensic evidence showed that the brown stains on the garage floor were Elodie's blood. Additionally, DNA found on crumpled tissues matched Guillaume's. Saliva found on cigarette butts belonged to both Elodie and Guillaume. Elodie's family asserted that she had never smoked due to her asthma, which caused her to have severe coughing and choking fits when exposed to cigarette smoke. The chilling reality emerged. Guillaume had kept Elodie in the garage for 2 days, repeatedly assaulting and likely torturing her, forcing her to smoke as part of his abuse. Guillaume changed his story after the investigators revealed the forensic evidence. He admitted that he and Elodie had been intimate in the garage, but insisted it was consensual. He claimed they had smoked together and talked a lot before he decided to let her go. However, he still maintained that Richard Lignier had killed her while he was away, supposedly because Richard feared Elodie might go to the police after he released her. This explanation raised many inconsistencies, the most significant being that Richard had no motive to kill Elodie. First, he had never met her, and she had never seen him or any of his family members. Second, Elodie had been brought to the garage in the trunk of a car, meaning she wouldn't have known where she was and couldn't lead the police there. Lastly, Richard was just an ordinary drunk, unable to physically harm anyone. He was satisfied with receiving payment in the form of Elodie's belongings and a promise of money from his friend once the situation was resolved. Earlier, investigators discovered an empty plastic water bottle in the garage. Guillaume claimed he felt sorry for Elodie and brought her water, but tests revealed that the liquid contained high levels of potent drugs. After consuming these drugs, Elodie would have likely been unconscious or barely aware, giving Guillaume the opportunity to do as he pleased. When questioned about why he drugged her, Guillaume changed his story again. He now said he was prepared to set her free and that they had agreed she wouldn't go to the police. He claimed Elodie wanted to return home to her family and forget the incident, as if it were just a bad dream. However, he asserted that she attempted to escape, which resulted in a struggle during which he hit her, explaining the blood stains found on the garage floor. He then locked her inside and left. Guillaume stated he drugged Elodie to calm her and prevent her from trying to escape again. He crushed some pills, dissolved them in water, and then departed, returning 12 hours later. By that time, Elodie was severely dehydrated. She quickly drank the water without noticing its odd taste and passed out within minutes. Guillaume claimed she accidentally overdosed because her weakened body couldn't handle the drugs. Realizing she had stopped breathing, he put her body in the trunk of her car, which he had left in a parking lot near the bar where they first met. Later, he drove the car to Richard's property using the keys he had taken from her. Although Guillaume refused to disclose where he took the car with Elodie's body, his account had numerous inconsistencies. Notably, a rope found in the garage contained sweat and skin cells from both Elodie and Guillaume, suggesting he likely strangled her. All the evidence was stacked against him, and he was aware of it. To reduce his sentence, Guillaume struck a deal with investigators, confessing that he had left the car near the old cemetery in Aigues-Mortes. The police found the vehicle on May 6, exactly where he indicated. It had been exposed to the sun for 3 days, and the body in the trunk was already decomposing. The autopsy revealed clear signs of torture, beatings, and strangulation. The victim had been tied up, drugged, assaulted, and ultimately strangled to death with a rope. The trial for the 3 individuals involved in the crime began in February 2008, nearly 3 years after the shocking events. Guillaume Maguad was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 22 years. Richard Lignier and his wife attempted to persuade the jury that they had no knowledge of the captive in their garage. They claimed they had merely let an old friend stay with them for a few days without asking questions. However, the discovery of the victims' belongings in their home contradicted their story. Ligniers was charged with aiding and abetting. In 2010, each received a 6-year prison sentence. Guillaume and his lawyer appealed the court's decision, attempting to place some of the blame for the crime on the Lignier. This was their only chance to lessen his life sentence and reduce the minimum time he would have to serve. On May 3, 2010, exactly 5 years after Elodie Morel's murder, the new trial began. During the proceedings, it was revealed that Richard and Francine were aware of Elodie's captivity and the serious danger she faced, yet they took no action. Not only did they keep her belongings and give some to their daughter, but they also supplied Guillaume with everything he requested, such as rope and water, without questioning his motives or considering the consequences. Ultimately, the court reduced Guillaume Maguad's life sentence to 30 years, requiring him to serve 2/3 of that time before he could be eligible for parole. Richard and Francine Lignier, due to their complicity and inaction, were each sentenced to 8 years in prison with no chance for early release. The tragic case of Elodie Morel serves as a harrowing reminder of the perils of unchecked trust and the devastating consequences of bystander indifference. Her dream of a modeling career, pursued with Rosa with hope, was cruelly exploited by Guillaume Maguad, whose deceit led to her brutal torture and murder. Equally disturbing is the complicity of Richard and Francine Lignier, who prioritized personal gain over human life, allowing Elodie's suffering to continue in their garage. This case underscores the critical need for vigilance in the face of enticing promises and the moral imperative to act against injustice. Elodie's story, etched into France's collective memory, calls us to honor her by fostering skepticism, compassion, and courage to prevent such tragedies from recurring. Lorraine Cox was a 32-year-old woman living in Exeter, UK. She is dating a man named Ellie who lives in Scotland. Although the distance between them is quite long, they have gotten used to it. At first, they only met on weekends and talked, but gradually their feelings for each other grew deeper. By 2020, they had been in contact in this way for 2 years. Despite the challenges of the distance, they decided to get engaged. Now, they are building a future together and preparing for their wedding. Lorraine is also planning to have their first child. However, in early 2020, their plans had to change for several reasons. By February, Lorraine had moved to Scotland to be with Ellie, where she obtained a temporary visa, and they spent considerable time together. When summer arrived, she wanted to return to Exeter to visit her family and friends for a month or 2. This trip was not a breakup, she simply missed her loved ones. Afterward, she intended to return to Scotland and continue strengthening their relationship. Although restrictions in the UK remained strict, they were gradually relaxing, allowing public events to resume and many establishments to reopen. People eagerly took to the streets to socialize again, and Lorraine was no exception. On September 1, 2020, she arrived at her father's house in Exeter, excited to reconnect with friends. They spent the evening visiting several bars, enjoying drinks and good company, until they realized it was time to go home. Everyone left in a good mood. On September 2nd, Lorraine posted an unusual message on social media, claiming she was going to leave the country. This surprised everyone, as her only previous move had been to Scotland, and she had no plans to relocate again. She had just arrived to visit her father and intended to stay for at least a month. This sudden change in her mood and plans seemed out of character. In her post, Lorraine mentioned wanting to move about 50 kilometers from her father's house to a place called Plymouth, which she described as the first stop on her planned journey. This behavior was shocking because Lorraine was not known for making impulsive decisions, especially on such a significant scale. She had a stable life and a loving relationship in Scotland and had never mentioned wanting to move elsewhere. Now, she was considering a move toward France. Unsurprisingly, this post had a deep impact on Ellie. They had a strong relationship, making his fear of losing her understandable. Lorraine's friends bombarded her with questions. Initially, she responded willingly, but as the conversation progressed, her tone changed and mistrust grew. Those who knew her well noticed shifts in her writing style. She began using unfamiliar emojis, making odd mistakes, and her messages conveyed a sense of hostility. This worried her loved ones, as she had always maintained positive relationships with them, and there was no reason for her to display such aggression or undergo drastic life changes. Her father, Tony, who was hosting her during this time, even showed a family friend her old messages alongside the new ones. He pointed out clear inconsistencies in her writing style. Even those who didn't know her well noticed something was off. Throughout this time, Lorraine's boyfriend, who was named Ellie, was especially concerned and tried to understand her behavior. Initially, she responded to him with short, cold replies, but eventually, her answers became even more abrupt. The conversation ended when Lorraine sent him an emoji of a middle finger. This intensified the suspicion that someone else was using her account. Ellie had known Lorraine for 2 years, so the idea that the trip was related to a breakup or conflict seemed unlikely. They valued each other, which made her odd responses even more perplexing. Unfortunately, because of the distance, her boyfriend felt helpless and unable to intervene. A situation arose concerning Tony, Lorraine's father. Determined to discover the truth, he faced a challenge because he was away at the time and couldn't check his daughter's room for clues. Instead, he began speaking to Lorraine's friends, particularly those who had been with her the day before her sudden move to Plymouth. He was scheduled to return home the next day. Upon arriving home, Tony's first action was to go to Lorraine's room, where his suspicions grew stronger. He had already spoken with her close friends, and they all confirmed that no one had seen Lorraine since their breakup at the bar when everyone had left for the night. Inside Lorraine's room, it appeared as though she had never returned after her outing with friends. Her belongings from Scotland remained untouched, and nothing was missing from her room. It looked as if she had left for an extended trip without taking any of her things, which seemed impossible. The most alarming discovery was the bag she had left behind. Lorraine had diabetes and always carried a first aid kit to monitor her blood sugar levels. Her health depended on these supplies, and she never went anywhere, even for a quick trip to the store, without them. For outings like the one to the bar, she typically used a smaller bag. The fact that her larger kit was still in her room raised serious concerns about her recent plans. Tony realized that his daughter had not returned from the party, leading him to fear that something might have happened to her health. The messages she had exchanged with friends and relatives also seemed troubling. Worried, Tony sent another message to Lorraine on social media, expressing concern for her health and asking if she was okay. He warned her that if she did not respond, he would have to contact the police. The message was seen, but he received no reply. After that, Tony's and Lorraine's friends could no longer tolerate the uncertainty and began their search. They started by looking for clues in the bar where they had spent the evening on September 2nd. They interviewed witnesses, distributed flyers, and retraced the presumed route Lorraine would have taken home. It was clear that something alarming must have happened during her journey since she never came home again. Law enforcement and journalists quickly became involved. They were skeptical of the theory that Lorraine might have suffered a health crisis. Detectives believed that if that were the case, she would not have been able to send messages to her friends. Furthermore, several days had passed since her disappearance, and she would likely have been found in a hospital, but tests of recent admissions yielded no results. It appeared far more likely that Lorraine had encountered danger from someone. Journalists rushed to report on the situation, highlighting concerns over Lorraine's disappearance. They recalled that in May 2018, 2 years before Lorraine vanished, an attacker named Robert Proud had attacked a woman who strikingly resembled her. He had abused her but did not kill her, and then evaded capture for a long time. Given his criminal history, it raised fears that there could be more victims. Although he had completed his prison sentence, investigators began considering Lorraine as a potential victim. At the time of her disappearance, Robert was living near the path Lorraine would have taken home. This connection led to his arrest, and police sought to extract a confession from him. They believed he had kidnapped, abused, and possibly killed her, and that he might have disposed of her body. It was suspected that he took her phone and pretended to communicate with her friends and family to buy himself time and create confusion. There was another theory regarding Lorraine's disappearance. Some believed that Robert might have attacked her, but instead of dying, she was hiding to avoid becoming his victim again. The detectives prioritized finding Lorraine because she was clearly in danger. Robert might have been holding her hostage. The situation could have escalated, posing a significant threat. To test this theory, they began reviewing surveillance footage from cameras along Lorraine's potential route that night. Even after narrowing down the time frame, they had about 11,000 hours of footage from over 400 cameras across 120 different locations. Analyzing this footage was time-consuming, but it proved worthwhile, yielding the first clues needed to catch the criminal. Eventually, they spotted a girl who matched Lorraine's description in the recordings. After leaving her friends at the bar, she headed toward her father's house without making any turns. She almost made it home, but a few blocks away, something caught her attention: a kebab shop on the ground floor of an apartment building, which was open at night. Lorraine went inside, likely to grab a snack, and then left to eat on a bench before continuing her way home. Around 2:45 a.m., she returned to the kebab shop, but this time accompanied by an unfamiliar man. This raised alarms because he didn't appear to be just a random passerby. The footage suggested they had interacted, and he had managed to get her attention. The police continued to investigate the recordings and noted that the young man had been following Lorraine after they left the shop. This behavior was concerning, especially since she seemed to be walking voluntarily and the street was deserted. Detectives suspected the man might be a predator who targeted his victim, potentially involved in Lorraine's disappearance and the messages she had sent to her loved ones after the incident. He maintained a distance while following her, trying to remain inconspicuous, and seemed to be assessing the situation. It looked as though he was stalking her, especially since she appeared intoxicated and was stumbling. She had a valuable phone, and with no one accompanying her that night, he saw an opportunity to attack. The police attempted to locate another recording to determine how Lorraine left the building from at least one camera, but were unsuccessful. It appeared she had not exited at all. They spent considerable time reviewing the video footage, only to confirm that Lorraine had not left since she was last seen. The detectives concluded that she might still be inside, possibly being held against her will. Unfortunately, by the time they gathered this information, 8 days had passed. Given this long duration, only a miracle could save Lorraine, who suffered from diabetes. Nevertheless, her family held on to hope. The police obtained a clear photo of the man who accompanied and followed Lorraine that night. They printed it out and began distributing it through the media to attract witnesses. Initially, they visited the kebab shop and spoke with the owner. He informed them that he lived above the shop but had rented the apartment below to a young man about a month ago. This young man had moved in unofficially and was very withdrawn, to the extent that the owner didn't know much about him. The owner even expressed doubts about the young man's name. When police officers visited the apartment, they anticipated finding a crime scene. However, everything was surprisingly neat and clean. The young man living there identified himself as Christopher Mayer and showed them his identification. There was no sign of Lorraine in the apartment, and he allowed the detectives inside without any resistance. They inspected the place thoroughly to ensure that no one was being held against their will. Christopher was then shown a photo of Lorraine, along with a CCTV image in which a man resembling him was seen accompanying her to the house. He strongly denied any connection, claiming that he did not know her. However, the clear photograph made the police skeptical, as the similarities were unmistakable. A brief verbal confrontation ensued, with Christopher maintaining his stance. During this exchange, he insisted that he would never bring a strange woman to his apartment. The police then became interested in Christopher's mobile phone, which they seized for examination. They discovered that it contained Lorraine's SIM card, although the card was currently missing. This evidence confirmed that he had at least seen her recently. Further investigation revealed that a suspicious post had been made on Lorraine's social media account using this mobile phone. It appeared that Christopher had sent strange messages to her loved ones. After the unsettling incident, whatever it was, he had taken Lorraine's phone. Rather than using it for communication, he inserted a SIM card into his own phone to access her contact list and social media account. This raised further suspicions about Christopher. He was the last person confirmed to have seen Lorraine alive, and his attempts to manipulate her account seemed suspicious. It became clear that he was trying to cover his tracks, raising questions about his motives that the authorities still needed to uncover. Christopher was arrested and charged with the kidnapping of Lorraine Cox. That same day, forensic experts arrived at his apartment to investigate. They used a substance called luminol to carefully examine the area. While they found several suspicious traces of evidence, the most alarming findings were in a nearby alley. During their search of the apartment, they discovered blood and numerous signs that supported the theory that Lorraine was dead, particularly around a garbage can. The forensic team speculated that Christopher might have disposed of evidence by throwing away the body. They searched the alley and found a large plastic bag inside one of the trash containers that contained human remains. However, it was not a complete body. Some parts, including the torso and head, were missing, making identification difficult. Consequently, the case shifted from a missing persons investigation to a murder investigation, and the work continued. Detectives learned that on the night of Lorraine's disappearance, in addition to Christopher, 5 other young men were present. However, none appeared on the CCTV footage with Lorraine. These men likely entered the apartment to buy food or for other reasons, but their involvement needed further investigation. They could have unwittingly been present during the crime or could have assisted in covering up evidence. Notably, the group behaved very differently. Except for Christopher, everyone was cooperative and willing to provide information. Upon further investigation, the 5 other young men were found to be locals who lived nearby. Since there was no evidence against them, they were released. In stark contrast, Christopher was uncooperative, reluctant to talk, and often gave vague or confusing answers. He seemed to believe that the police lacked sufficient evidence against him, but they soon discovered that his real name was Azam Mangori. This revelation marked a turning point in the investigation, as detectives confronted him with the truth, signaling the beginning of the unraveling of his story. Azam claims that he changed his name because he was born in the Kurdistan region of Iraq, where people who do not follow tradition can face severe punishment, including being stoned to death. As an adult, he left his conservative homeland but still lives in fear of being hunted down and killed. To avoid this dangerous situation, he began calling himself Christopher. He had been living illegally in the UK since December 2018 to avoid returning to Iraq. Azam also possessed a high-quality fake ID under the name Christopher Mayer to evade detection by immigration authorities. This explains why the landlord knew almost nothing about the man. He was very cautious, had not attended school or worked anywhere, and lived off odd jobs. However, the interrogation ended abruptly. After admitting to these things, he refused to talk about Lorraine. His previous admissions were not significant to the police. DNA testing confirmed that the remains found in a trash bin were those of Lorraine. In Azam's apartment, DNA traces and other evidence indicated that Lorraine had been killed there because Azam had failed to clean thoroughly. The police also discovered a large handsaw and replacement blades purchased after the crime. Other items found included a driver's license, a debit card, and a wallet, all mutilated. Nearby trash bins contained bloody clothing, Lorraine's phone, and a SIM card discarded in the sewer. Unfortunately, parts of her body were never recovered. Detectives analyzed the location data from Azam's mobile phone on the day of Lorraine's murder and the subsequent days when he disposed of evidence. This investigation led them to a location on the city's outskirts known as Tin Pit Hill. During the search, they found Lorraine's torso and head, which were not well concealed. Investigators noted unsettling details. A piece of clothing was stuffed into her mouth, and a patch of skin was missing from her back, possibly taken as a trophy by the perpetrator. Unfortunately, no other body parts were located, and the remains were in an advanced state of decomposition, complicating the determination of the cause of death. The forensic expert concluded that Lorraine had likely been strangled. Despite strong evidence of his guilt, Azam continued to deny his involvement and created false stories. He even attempted to involve banned organizations in the case. The trial commenced in spring 2021. Although he never confessed, Azam and his defense team significantly altered his narrative. He now claimed to have a normal orientation and stated that he encountered Lorraine when she came to his place late at night after a bar visit. He approached her on the street and convinced her to come to his apartment for some intimacy. Azam maintained that Lorraine voluntarily came to his apartment after drinking heavily and using illegal substances. He claimed that after trying those substances himself, he experienced severe distortion of perception and lost consciousness. When he regained awareness, he found Lorraine in the bathroom, unresponsive. He alleged that he saw a puddle of urine beneath her and believed she had overdosed. Azam attempted to perform CPR, but it was unsuccessful. In a panic and without knowing the emergency number, he sat on the bathroom floor next to her body. Hallucinations then began, and he claimed to see dark creatures emerging from her mouth, prompting him to shove a piece of his t-shirt into her mouth to stop it. He pushed the cloth in so far that it could have caused her to choke. Despite being in a state of panic, he managed to find and send a video he had recorded around the same time to a friend, where he appeared calm and even exhaled smoke into the camera. He explained that he filmed the video to help himself calm down. His behavior grew increasingly bizarre. Instead of calling for help, he decided to dispose of the body and planned to flee from his relatives. Naturally, this account sounded implausible, leaving him with no solid defense. According to Azam, he was unsure what he would do after Lorraine died and kept her body in his apartment until he decided to dispose of it. When his anxiety reached its peak, he chose to throw it away. He called a taxi to take the bag with the remains to a wooded area on the outskirts of Exeter. Prosecutors noted that he seemed to be obsessed with amputation, as evidenced by the precise cuts he made, which horrified forensic experts. It was clear he had researched this topic extensively and was well prepared. That evening, Azam tried to connect with people on an escort website, seeking companionship but was unsuccessful. Later, he saw Lorraine on the street eating alone and viewed her as an ideal target. It seems that Azam may have premeditated this murder to fulfill his dark fantasies. Even with substantial evidence against him, his trial lasted 5 weeks. Ultimately, the jury found him guilty of murder and attempting to obstruct justice. He received a life sentence but is eligible for parole after 20 years, which means he could be released at the age of 44. Lorraine's boyfriend, Ellie, experienced profound grief, stating that a part of him died with her. He lives daily with this pain and struggles against despair. Lorraine's father, Tony, organized a charity march to rally support for his daughter. Participants silently walked the route she would have taken from the bar to her home, a journey she never completed. In the aftermath, Tony became an activist advocating for more CCTV cameras on UK streets to help prevent and solve violent crimes. He also started to make regular donations to an anti-abuse organization based in the UK. Even after justice was served, Lorraine Cox's family remained uncertain about how Azam was able to lure her into his apartment. Security footage showed her following him willingly. Azam claimed that he engaged her in conversation and offered her alcohol and a banned substance, which she accepted. However, Toxicology reports found no traces of banned substances in her system, and a forensic expert stated that she did not die from diabetes, suggesting that Azam's account might be false. Sadly, the truth about what happened in his apartment may never be revealed, as only Azam and Lorraine know what truly occurred. Some believe Azam exploited Lorraine's kindness by asking for help, and that she may have felt unable to refuse, ultimately leading her into a dangerous situation. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Candy Montgomery. Candy Montgomery was born on November 15, 1949, into a military family, which meant that she moved frequently throughout her childhood. Candy's bubbly personality made her stand out. At the age of 20, she met Pat Montgomery while they were both working at a tool and equipment company. In the 1970s, Pat was employed as an electrical engineer, while Candy worked as a secretary. Pat was hardworking and responsible, and his income provided stability and comfort in their lives. At first, their relationship faced many challenges. Candy found Pat unattractive. However, her views changed when she heard rumors about Pat's income from family friends, which made her want to give him a chance. In 1977, they decided to get married, and soon after, they moved to Wylie, Texas, a small town that is an ideal place to raise a family, offering a low crime rate and a quiet atmosphere. Candy, a devoted wife and mother, settled into her new home with Pat and their 2 children. She became active in social events, attended church, and sang in the local choir. Additionally, she also became a member of the Parents Committee and earned the respect of the community, with many people looking up to her. Overall, the Montgomery family had everything they needed for a comfortable life. They got along well with their neighbors and regularly attended the local Lucas Methodist Church. Many considered them a typical American family, with a daughter and a son who received plenty of love and support from their parents. Soon after moving in, Candy met a local school teacher named Betty Gore. They joined the church choir together, and their daughters quickly became close friends, often spending the night at each other's homes. Candy and Betty also became friends, occasionally attending school events and church together and frequently seeing each other on weekends. Gradually, Candy found her home life boring. She began to take an interest in Betty's husband, Alan Gore, whom she met at social events in town. Betty had met Alan when he was a teaching assistant at the university. Initially, Betty's family disapproved of their relationship, believing that Alan was too quiet and unsuitable for her. However, they fell in love and ignored their parents' concerns. They married in the 70s and later welcomed their first daughter before moving to Wylie. Alan was a hardworking family man, but his job often required him to leave town. Betty did not enjoy these absences. She preferred when Alan was home with her and their daughter. Whenever he was away, she had to manage the household and care for the child by herself. Although she kept in touch with Alan, she often expressed frustration about his business trips and her excessive exhaustion. One day, Betty called Alan's boss to ask him to stop sending Alan on business trips. This was impossible because he was an irreplaceable, first-class professional. Over time, Betty's frustration grew, leading her to frequently contact Alan's manager while he was away. Some speculated that her behavior suggested she might be suffering from postpartum depression. Instead of seeing Alan's job as an opportunity for financial stability and family happiness, Betty viewed it as a burden. She may have exaggerated her situation, especially since other women had dealt with similar problems more easily. Her situation may have been worsened by the fact that she had few friends. The relationship between Alan and his wife Betty became increasingly strained. Alan felt additional pressure from Betty, who could not understand the necessity of his business trips. These trips were essential to his high salary, which he could not afford to lose. Betty could be a difficult person, so Alan tried his best not to upset her as their marriage began to show signs of trouble. He started staying late at work more often, hoping to avoid arguments. Betty faced challenges even before she became pregnant. Likewise, Candy had her own struggles, and both of their marriages were deteriorating. When Alan and Candy met, they felt an immediate attraction and saw each other as an escape from their problems. However, they were both married, went to church, and lived in conservative communities, which made the idea of an affair terrifying for them. In October 1978, their situation changed dramatically. After a volleyball game in the church community, Candy expressed her feelings and proposed to Alan that they start a relationship. Alan, who was feeling frustrated with his own marriage, was intrigued by the suggestion but remained hesitant. A week later, during another volleyball game, Alan's interest in Candy increased significantly. He spent the entire week pondering her words. At this point, the tension between him and Betty was escalating. Seizing the opportunity, Candy reiterated her proposal, and this time Alan could not refuse. Meanwhile, Candy also felt anxious about the situation. She confided in her close friend, a church pastor, about her desire to have an affair, although she did not reveal who she would be involved with. Candy's friend tried to convince her not to go through with it, but Candy remained silent about her intentions. When Alan agreed to the relationship with Candy, they both made a list of pros and cons and established strict rules to follow. The main idea of their agreement was to keep their relationship purely physical. It seemed that Candy wanted to avoid emotional connection in order to maintain her relationship with her husband and simply have fun on the side. She convinced Alan to adhere to these rules. The rules stated that they would meet in the city, pay $23 cash for a room, and Alan would cover half the cost. Their meetings became frequent, always focused on intimacy. They could only meet for short periods and never spend the entire night together. A key point in their agreement was the requirement to avoid any emotional connection. They agreed that if either of them showed any feelings, they would end the relationship immediately. Candy found joy and excitement in this new relationship. However, her husband Pat was a good man, a loving father, and a reliable provider for the family. So she continued to maintain a stable relationship with him. Surprisingly, Alan's marriage also seemed to improve. Betty became less annoying, and Alan even began to see the positive aspects of his marriage. He started to spend more time at home with his family. During this time, an important event occurred. Betty became pregnant again, which brought genuine joy to both her and her husband. To celebrate Betty's pregnancy, Candy threw a party. Over time, the relationship between Candy and Alan began to change. They started to see each other less often. Alan also wanted to spend more time with his children and focused on saving his marriage with Betty. Alan began attending a church program aimed at restoring and strengthening marital relationships. After participating in the program, he realized that his relationship with Candy should end. On the way home, he avoided eye contact with Candy, making it clear that he did not want to continue their affair and had chosen to focus on his marriage. Alan even changed jobs to reduce his business trips. He ended the relationship and refused to see Candy. Candy felt deeply hurt by this decision. At first, she tried to suppress her feelings, but the emotional bond they had built over the year became too great. She was even more disappointed when Alan ended things. She felt used and discarded. After a while, Pat Montgomery discovered a postcard with a congratulatory message addressed to Candy. Pat realized that Candy had been involved in an affair. However, he was not angry with his wife. Instead, he blamed himself for the situation, believing that he had neglected her. At this point, only Betty was unaware of the recently ended love triangle. Pat decided to follow the same path that had helped Alan improve his marriage. He took Candy to a church program designed to strengthen the relationship between husband and wife. The program lasted about a year. and it seemed that Pat did not consider Candy's affair to be significant. Betty still did not know what had happened, but everything changed on Friday, June 13, 1980, at 10 a.m. Candy went to Betty's house to pick up a swimsuit for her eldest daughter. She then went home and continued her day as usual. At the same time, Alan was away on business. He tried calling Betty at home several times, but no one answered. This worried him, as it was unusual for her not to respond. She often waited for his phone call and sometimes called him several times an hour. Her sudden silence concerned him. Alan then asked the neighbors to check on her. Late in the evening, the neighbors returned and knocked on Alan's door to check, but there was no response. They searched the grounds with flashlights but found nothing unusual outside. When they entered the unlocked house, everything seemed normal. In the kitchen, they noticed 2 empty glasses on the table. However, when they called out, no one answered except for the sound of a child crying from the basement. When they went down to the basement, they found Betty dead. Betty's body was so badly disfigured that it was unrecognizable. The neighbors quickly called the police and informed Alan of their discovery. Forensic experts determined that Betty had suffered 41 axe wounds. The murder weapon was found just a meter away from her. Betty's face was so badly damaged that the only way to identify her was through dental records. One of her hands, which may have been used to cover her face during the attack, was nearly severed. Most of her injuries occurred after her death. The violent nature of the attack suggested that the attacker knew Betty well. There was no sign of robbery or abuse. It appeared to be a personally motivated attack. Unfortunately, DNA evidence was of no help to the police at the time. The murder shocked the entire city, which had never experienced a homicide before. People were scared, worried that a dangerous criminal might be lurking in their neighborhood. Residents were eager to help the police catch the brutal killer, but the investigation was just beginning. At the time of the investigation, advanced technologies such as DNA testing, surveillance cameras, and cell phone tracking had not yet been developed. The police focused on Betty's surroundings, examining her relationships with her family and neighbors, but everyone had a solid alibi. Upon hearing of the tragedy, Alan immediately called Candy, knowing that his eldest daughter was staying at her house overnight. He checked to make sure the child was safe and shared the sad news about his wife. Candy feigned shock upon hearing the news of Betty's death. Forensic experts were working at Betty's house, trying to collect any evidence to link the events. They later discovered a fingerprint on the refrigerator door, along with bloodstains that clearly showed a shoe print. The police focused on Alan as the prime suspect, since it is not uncommon for a husband to kill his wife. It was believed that the murder may have occurred in a fit of rage. Meanwhile, the police arrived at Candy's house. She remained completely calm. However, upon hearing that the police had discovered a shoe print in Betty's house, she quickly tore it into small pieces and threw it in a trash can a few blocks away. When Alan returned home, he was questioned by the police. Alan was asked about possible infidelity. He maintained that he was faithful to his wife and insisted that she could not have had an affair. After questioning, he was released, but the next day he returned to the police to confess to the lies regarding the infidelity, which he said troubled him. The police discovered that there was, in fact, an affair involving Betty's best friend Candy. Furthermore, he mentioned that he had decided to end the relationship himself, which could have been a motive, to have visited Betty on the day of the murder to pick up a swimsuit. Police discovered that she was the last person known to have seen Betty alive. Additionally, the time of Candy's visit coincided with the estimated time of Betty's death. Meanwhile, Alan had a solid alibi, as he was out of town on business during the incident. As a result, Candy became the prime suspect and was brought in for questioning. She admitted to going to Betty's house that morning, where they chatted and had coffee together. According to Candy, nothing unusual happened, and she left with her swimsuit about 30 minutes later. She acknowledged having had an affair, but stated that the relationship had ended long ago. Both Candy and Alan insisted that Betty did not know about the affair. The experienced police suspected that Candy was hiding important information. They offered her a lie detector test, but she refused, apparently terrified, which only heightened the police's suspicions. The fingerprints collected at the crime scene matched Candy's. On June 26, Candy was arrested for murder, but her husband posted a $100,000 bail, allowing her to be released the following day. Case documents were collected and reviewed over the next week, during which the attorney began to formulate a defense strategy, knowing that a trial was inevitable. The entire city was shocked to learn of the killer's identity, but many refused to believe it, and even helped her husband raise money for bail. No one could have imagined Candy wielding an axe and attacking her best friend, Betty. Although she initially denied any involvement in Betty's death, she later confessed to the attack on the advice of her attorney. The confession came under circumstances that, under state law, likely allowed her to avoid punishment. The case was widely reported in the media. According to the prosecutor's office, Candy stated that she had visited Betty to pick up a swimsuit for her daughter. During their conversation, Candy suddenly revealed that she had slept with Betty's husband. Betty then went down to the basement to get some things, and Candy followed her. While in the basement, a struggle broke out between them, during which Betty brandished a weapon to attack Candy. Candy suffered multiple cuts on her hands while trying to defend herself until Betty finally struck her in the head. Candy believed she had sustained severe scalp injuries and experienced temporary amnesia. She claimed to have suffered several other injuries as well, but somehow managed to retrieve the axe. She did not remember what happened next, and only regained consciousness after washing off the blood in the bathroom. To avoid facing the consequences of her actions, she changed into Betty's clothes and chose not to go back to the basement. The prosecutor's office found this argument hard to believe because of the violence involved in the case. The extent of Betty's injuries suggested that this was a serious crime and not self-defense against an aggressive friend. The prosecution argued that it was a premeditated murder motivated by jealousy. Furthermore, there were very few injuries on Candy's body. Only a scratch on her toe was noted. The trial began on October 20, 1980, and attracted considerable media attention, filling the courtroom with over 200 people. The defense presented several witnesses, including pastors and church members, who testified that Candy was a loving mother, wife, and good person. Candy testified confidently and answered every question without hesitation or confusion. The jury called an independent psychiatrist from Houston, who used hypnosis during the evaluation. He supported the defense's argument, stating that she had unconsciously been in a rage due to a head injury related to a childhood incident. The psychiatrist argued that in her rage, Candy unconsciously recalled a traumatic memory from her childhood, which led to her violent emotional reaction. The independent experts concluded that Candy had unintentionally killed Betty. Alan, Betty's husband, testified in Candy's defense during the trial. Alan mentioned that in the last days of Betty's life, her mental health had declined. She was struggling with postpartum depression and was irritable. Betty believed that her husband had been unfaithful, but he denied it, although he had ended the affair. Candy's attorney used this testimony to argue that Betty was in a state of mental instability, driven by her husband's supposed infidelity, which led her to try to harm Candy. The jury found these arguments persuasive. After deliberating for over 3 hours, the jury found Candy Montgomery not guilty. Betty's family and friends were shocked and shouted angry comments at Candy as she left. This was her attorney's first criminal case, and the outcome was a surprising victory for the defense. Alan later remarried, but his second marriage ended quickly. Candy and Pat, her husband, felt compelled to leave the city due to pressure from the local community, and they moved to Georgia with their children to start over. Over the years, the couple tried to save their relationship, but eventually, they separated. After the split, Candy chose to return to her maiden name to avoid public scrutiny. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Browning family. In 2008, Nicholas Browning turned 15. He was considered a kind-hearted teenager and a hard-working student. As the eldest child, he grew up in a family where his father, John Browning, was a respected attorney. John was also a Boy Scout leader and Sunday school teacher, earning admiration and recognition in the local community. Nicholas's mother, Tamara, was a kind and humble housewife, while his younger brothers, Benjamin and Greg, were well-loved members of the family. The Browning family lived in a house in Cockeysville, Maryland, a small town. Nicholas was an excellent student and a dedicated Boy Scout. While in high school, he was a tall and handsome young man, active on the golf and lacrosse teams, and admired as a role model. Many believed he had a bright future ahead of him. On the surface, the family seemed to be living a happy life, until tragedy struck. On the afternoon of February 2, 2008, Nicholas's parents drove him to a friend's house for a sleepover, where Nicholas and his friends planned to watch movies and play video games. The next morning, Nicholas and his friends needed to return home. Nicholas's parents had promised to pick him up in the morning, but they did not arrive on time. He tried calling them to find out what was going on, but no one answered. Frustrated, the teens decided to go to the mall with his friend's father. After shopping, they dropped Nicholas off at his home. During the trip, Nicholas repeatedly called and texted his parents, but there was still no response. When they arrived at his house, they noticed the family car parked in the driveway, but the house was strangely quiet. When Nicholas opened the door and walked in, he witnessed a horrifying scene. His entire family had been murdered. His father, John Browning, his mother, Tamara, and his two younger brothers, Greg and Benjamin, were all dead. A friend's father called 911 to report the incident, and the police arrived quickly at the scene. They found the teenagers in the yard, visibly shaken. Nicholas immediately claimed that a robbery had taken place. He explained that while he was staying overnight with friends, someone had broken into the house. He believed that the intruders' plans had been interrupted by his parents, and as a result, the robbers had killed the entire family. However, the crime scene shows another theory. There were no signs of a struggle, and police discovered 4 victims, each killed by a single gunshot to the head, in various parts of the house. A quick inspection of the property revealed no evidence of theft. Furniture was undamaged, and valuables in plain sight had not been disturbed. There were no signs of forced entry or any disturbance, leading the police to dismiss the idea of a botched robbery. Nicholas's account and behavior raised suspicions. Despite the teenager's young age and the possibility of shock, all 4 boys were taken to the police station for questioning. To ensure that their statements could not be coordinated, they were separated into different rooms for individual questioning. During the interrogations, Nicholas's friends all gave the same account. They had spent the evening watching movies and playing video games until late, after which the group went to bed. They said they had not heard or seen anything unusual that night. The interview with Nicholas took place in a private room. The officer found Nicholas's behavior suspicious. When the officer entered the room, Nicholas was sitting quietly with his head down, appearing calm and even a little sleepy. An unusual reaction, considering that his entire family had just been murdered. The officer approached the conversation in a friendly manner, aiming to make it seem like a casual discussion with the witness. His goal was to gain Nicholas's trust so that he would answer truthfully. The officer hoped to secure a confession without a defense attorney present. Nicholas remained calm the interview. He explained that he had returned home from school at around 2:45 p.m. Shortly afterward, his parents decided to take him to a friend's house. Since the friend lived less than a kilometer away, they often walked to each other's houses. Nicholas told the same story as his friends, stating that they spent the evening playing video games and watching movies before going to bed. However, he admitted that he left his friend's house and went to his parents' house around midnight. His plan was to steal the family car and go out with his friends, making sure his parents didn't find out. When he got home, he noticed that the light was on in his parents' bedroom window. At that point, he climbed into the car. To avoid being seen, he lay down on the floor of the back seat. Nicholas was worried that the noise he made while opening the car door might alert his parents, but he didn't want to face his strict father's scolding. He decided to stay quiet and wait until the house was settled and everyone went back to bed. Nicholas claimed that he waited in the car and eventually fell asleep. It is possible that the shooting occurred during this time. Nicholas stated that he didn't hear anything and only woke up later before leaving. The forensic experts' report confirmed that the attack on the family occurred around midnight, killing everyone in the house. The family appeared to have been caught off guard. The first shot was fired at close range, killing the father, John, who was sleeping on the couch downstairs. Tamara and the two sons, who were sleeping upstairs, were also killed in their sleep. The police suspected that Nicholas might have been involved in the murder. His behavior raised suspicions, as he had withheld information from the police. It seemed odd that he chose to hide in the family car instead of immediately returning to his friend's house. Furthermore, Nicholas was the only survivor of the family and was home at the time of the murder. However, he claimed that he didn't hear anything, which further cast doubt on his testimony. Nicholas's claim that the lights were on in the house raised additional suspicions, as they were off when the police arrived at the scene. Considering his statement about the robbery, it was unclear why the robbers would leave the lights on during the robbery, and then turn them off afterward. Typically, criminals do not waste time on such actions. Nicholas had no explanation for these inconsistencies. The police then spoke to Nicholas's friend, who stated that Nicholas was at his house in the evening, but was no longer there when he woke up around midnight. According to his statement, Nicholas had already left by that time. This created an inconsistency in the timeline, suggesting that the teens might not be telling the truth. Due to inconsistencies in their statements, the police returned to Nicholas's friend for clarification. Initially, the friend confirmed that Nicholas was no longer at the house around midnight. However, when the police pointed out the conflicting timelines provided by others, he quickly changed his story. He then stated that Nicholas was still at the house at midnight. Nicholas's friend appeared nervous and hesitant to tell the truth, possibly in an effort to protect his friend. After being calmed down by the police, the friend admitted that after Nicholas left, he went straight to bed. He also revealed that he knew Nicholas had planned to steal his parents' car, but did not expect him to get stuck in the car or harm his family. The police then spoke to Nicholas again and shared new statements from his friends. This time, Nicholas claimed that he had left his friend's house and returned home to get his car later, at around 1 a.m. He changed his story again, stating that the lights were on when he arrived, but were off when he woke up. He assumed this meant that the robbers had entered the house while he was there. Nicholas still insisted that he had fallen asleep in his car. But how could he have slept after hearing 4 gunshots? This time, Nicholas said he had woken up at around 5 a.m. when his friend called him. Instead of returning to his parents' house, he went back to his friend's house without his car. Although Nicholas was increasingly under suspicion, he tried to remain calm. At times, he even laughed and joked during conversations, which the police interpreted as an attempt to mislead them. Nicholas appeared innocent, but the police believed there was something much more sinister behind his facade. When Nicholas eventually returned home with his friends, they entered the house through the garage. Nicholas invited his friends inside, which seemed unusual. Once inside, Nicholas pointed out that the garage door was open, which he found strange since his family always kept it closed. According to his friend's father, Nicholas repeatedly emphasized this to everyone present before they entered. As they walked through the living room, Nicholas led the way. He was the first to see his father lying on the couch, covered in blood. Shocked, Nicholas shouted to the others. His friend saw the body but immediately ran outside, refusing to go any further. During questioning, Nicholas confirmed all of these details. What worried the police most was the calm, emotionless way he spoke about everything, which was highly unusual for someone grieving the loss of a family member. When this story became public, people were shocked and tried to understand what had happened to Nicholas's family. Later, in his defense, Nicholas admitted that the car keys had been in his coat pocket the entire time. He remembered them when he visited his friend's house, and that was when he hatched the plan to steal the family car. The police were puzzled as to why he had not revealed this information earlier. They believed he was hiding something and lying again. Nicholas's friend stated that Nicholas had called home and asked his younger brother to leave the back door open, although the reason for this request was unclear. After this revelation, however, the police became certain that Nicholas had committed the murder of his family. He also told the police that his father owned 2 guns and had taken him hunting many times, so he was familiar with using them. Nicholas's friends revealed that he frequently had conflicts with his father, who had caught him drinking on multiple occasions. However, Nicholas claimed that a man who lived near his family was capable of such a brutal crime. He was referring to a neighbor who was a drug user and had a history of legal trouble. The police, however, believed this was an attempt to shift blame and divert suspicion from himself. There was no evidence against the neighbor, and he had a solid alibi. When the police publicly identified Nicholas as the prime suspect, he appeared very nervous and insisted that he was innocent. He later claimed that his parents were extremely cruel and that he had suffered years of mental and physical abuse at their hands. During questioning, Nicholas repeatedly asked the police if he could be treated in a psychiatric hospital instead of receiving a life sentence. The police did not give a clear answer to this question. However, Nicholas's suspicious interest played against him. Nicholas clearly realized his guilt and hopefully reduced the severity of the punishment. By the end of the interrogation, there was sufficient evidence against Nicholas, but his motives remained unclear. According to his friends, Nicholas had argued with his father shortly before the murder. He later recounted several instances in which his father had treated him harshly, even resorting to violence. Nicholas mentioned that their relationship had significantly worsened during the fall. It seems that the challenges of adolescence had a major negative impact on his behavior. His father, known for being strict, had tried to discipline and correct his son's behavior. According to Nicholas's testimony, on the day of the incident, he went to visit friends after his father had spanked him that morning for reasons Nicholas considered unreasonable. Police suspect that the punishment stemmed from the teenager's refusal to obey his parents. Friends' testimonies indicated that Nicholas, like many teenagers, had started to rebel. Tensions with his father were especially high after Nicholas was caught drinking on multiple occasions. Nicholas explained that he drank as a way to cope with his problems. Some relatives supported this claim, describing his father as a stern man. In interviews with Nicholas's classmates and close circle, police learned that the circumstances leading up to the massacre had been developing long before the actual event. However, it remains unclear why he killed his mother and younger brothers, who had not harmed him. Many classmates recalled him sharing stories about how he could no longer handle the abuse and emotional pressure from his father. While many described Nicholas as a hard-working and calm, kind student, his closest friends were aware of his darker side. Outside of school, he often beat his younger brothers, stole alcohol from his father's bar, and even took the family car without permission. Nicholas displayed troubling behavior, frequently bullying younger students and those with disabilities. Nicholas eventually broke down and confessed to killing his parents and younger brothers, though his explanation was both strange and disturbing. He claimed that during a sleepover with friends, he had returned home, sneaked in, and found his father asleep on the couch. Nicholas took a gun, contemplated his actions for about half an hour, and then decided to go through with it. He shot his father, and since everyone in the house was asleep, no one heard the gunshots. However, he did not stop there. After killing his father, he went upstairs and killed his mother before entering younger brother's room, where he also killed both of them. Nicholas admitted he killed younger brothers because they would have called the police. He explained that he had asked one of younger brothers to leave the door unlocked the day before, suggesting the murders may have been premeditated. Nicholas claimed he shot his family members in the head to ensure they would not suffer lasting pain. He then led police to the location of the murder weapon, which he had hidden in bushes on his family's property. Ballistic tests confirmed the weapon was used in the murders, and DNA evidence matching Nicholas's was found on the gun's barrel. He was eventually formally charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. Many people viewed Nicholas positively, so much so that after his arrest, the court received several letters pleading for leniency. One of these letters came from his grandfather, who claimed that Nicholas had endured years of physical and mental abuse from his father. Some people found it hard to believe that Nicholas could be guilty. While awaiting trial just 2 days before it began, Nicholas was in prison and made a phone call to a friend. Their conversation, which was recorded, included Nicholas joking about escaping. This behavior indicated that he felt no remorse and did not grasp the seriousness of his actions. However, during the trial, the mood changed dramatically. At one point, Nicholas burst into tears and apologized to his relatives, expressing deep remorse. The prosecution used this moment to portray him as manipulative, citing it as evidence of his two-faced nature. On the other hand, the defense argued that such a seemingly upright young man could not be a cold-blooded killer. These conflicting portrayals became a central focus of the trial. The prosecution highlighted Nicholas's darker side, supported by testimony from numerous witnesses, while the defense emphasized his positive qualities, including his involvement in the Boy Scouts and his excellent academic record. During the hearing, Nicholas became so emotional that he was unable to read his apology speech, leaving his attorney to read it for him. The defense's claim that Nicholas was insane was quickly dismissed. During interviews with the police, he had shown no signs of mental illness. Furthermore, he had no history of mental health problems or disorders. Despite this, his attorney pushed for Nicholas to be sent to a psychiatric facility that provided rehabilitation programs for juvenile offenders. The defense argued that Nicholas's motive for the crime was unconvincing. If it had been for money, he would not have been able to access it until adulthood. Killing his family would have only worsened his circumstances, potentially placing him in an orphanage or foster care. This suggested that Nicholas did not fully understand the consequences of his actions. A psychiatric evaluation was conducted, which concluded that Nicholas was mentally fit to stand trial. This ruled out the use of mental health as a defense. Since crimes like this are punishable by death under state law, Nicholas faced serious consequences. However, due to his age, he was not eligible for the death penalty. In January 2009, Nicholas finally reached a plea agreement with the prosecution. Nicholas Browning pleaded guilty to all charges, and a jury sentenced him to 4 life terms. He is currently incarcerated at a correctional facility in Cumberland, Maryland. In 2014, he requested that his sentence be reconsidered, but his request was denied. In Maryland, granting a pardon for a life sentence requires the governor's approval, which has not occurred in the state since 1994. This makes it unlikely that Nicholas will ever be released. On a lonely road in Morelos, a young woman's body was found. Bystanders quickly called for emergency help. She was lying still, her skin had noticeable bruises. There were no ID or personal belongings nearby to identify her. Ariadna Lopez was born on July 5, 1995, in a challenging neighborhood in Mexico City. Despite having limited resources, she grew up in a loving environment. Her mother raised her and her older brother, Omar Rodriguez. Their father was mostly absent and had little interest in being involved in their lives. In his absence, Omar took on the role of a protector and role model for Ariadna, creating a strong bond that gave her a sense of security knowing she was supported. Ariadna had a warm and friendly personality, which made her well liked by her friends. She easily connected with others and was known for her honesty, helpfulness. During her school years, she formed close friendships, shared dreams about the future. However, her adulthood was marked by tragedy. In 2018, when Ariadna was only 23, her mother was diagnosed with cancer. The illness progressed quickly, and the family soon faced the heart-wrenching loss. The death of her mother affected both Ariadna and Omar deeply. This experience strengthened their relationship, forced Ariadna to grow up quickly, taking charge of her own life. Before her mother's illness, Ariadna started dating a young man, and their relationship progressed quickly. Soon, she discovered she was pregnant. The birth of their son was a significant turning point, but it did not bring long-term stability to their relationship. They realized early that they were not compatible as a couple and decided to part ways. However, they continued to work together to co-parent their son. As a new mother, Ariadna faced various challenges. She had to juggle parenting with the need to find a stable job. Her journey toward financial independence began when she secured a job at a popular bar in Mexico City that catered to affluent clients. This role came with high expectations regarding professionalism and social skills. At the bar, Ariadna learned to interact effectively with diverse people. Despite the stress of the job, she met its challenges by using her charm and strong work ethic. When the global issue struck, Ariadna's life changed dramatically. The bar where she worked closed, and she lost her job. Instead of feeling defeated, Ariadna viewed this as an opportunity to pursue a long-held dream, opening her own beauty salon. This new venture represented her determination to shape her own life. With her experience and a strong network of contacts, she successfully established a business that provided financial security for herself and her son. During this time, Ariadna began a new relationship with a man she felt a strong connection with. This relationship brought her happiness and a sense of stability. She balanced her responsibilities between her son, her business, and her new partner. Although her days were busy, she welcomed each moment with appreciation, eager for the new opportunities that came her way. By the age of 27, Ariadna's life was like a carefully arranged puzzle. Every success and challenge added to the overall picture of her journey. She had faced loss, rebuilt her life from scratch, focused on her son's future, and achieved her independence. However, just as this chapter of her life seemed to be starting on a positive note, it was unfortunately a precursor to something much more troubling. Ariadna met Vanessa Flores through mutual friends at a social event where Ariadna was with her friends. Vanessa made a strong impression. She was young, energetic, and charismatic, easily attracting attention with everyone around her. However, those close to Vanessa often noted that she could be unpredictable. Behind her charm, there were some more difficult aspects to her personality, and her actions sometimes surprised others. Rodel Astudillo Garcia, a middle-aged entrepreneur, often appeared in Vanessa's social group. His name was frequently associated with rumors due to his wealth, influence, and extravagant lifestyle. He was often seen with younger women who wanted to join his circle. There were many whispers about him, including tales of high-profile connections and even suggestions of links to organized groups. However, no one in his social circle could confirm any of these claims. Rodel himself steered clear of direct questions regarding his past or business dealings. His presence garnered both respect and a sense of unease. Ariadna was smart and independent, but she didn't realize how different her new friends were from her usual social circle. Vanessa, eager to impress, often boasted about her connections to influential people, particularly Ratel, whom she claimed could solve problems effortlessly. Gradually, Ariadna began spending more time with this group. Vanessa seemed genuinely intrigued by Ariadna, lavishing attention on her and diligently trying to earn her trust. When Rodel learned about Ariadna from Vanessa, he quickly wanted to meet her. During their first encounter, he surprised her with his attentiveness and charm. His confidence attracted people, including Ariadna. However, behind his polished facade lay a more complicated character. Those who had interacted with him mentioned his manipulative nature. Despite this, Ariadna perceived him as respectful and even kind. Vanessa played an important role in building the connection. She often invited Ariadna to events where Roddel was also present, fostering a welcoming atmosphere. However, as time went on, small warning signs began to emerge. Ariadna's close friends started advising her to be wary of this group. Some knew about Rattel's dubious reputation and Vanessa's unpredictable behavior. They were concerned that this new social circle might carry hidden dangers. Ariadna dismissed her friends' concerns about her new social circle, viewing her friendship with Vanessa as a refreshing escape from everyday stress. It offered her a chance to experience new things. Meanwhile, Roddel tried to win her over by being generous and friendly, inviting her to dinners and parties that felt fun. Even though Ariadna was in a relationship, she continued to keep her friendships and go to social events. Those who knew her said her partner trusted her and had no issues with her socializing. As time went on, Ariadna noticed some changes in her relationships. Vanessa began to call her more often, suggesting outings and making plans that focused on spending time together. At the same time, Roddel was gradually trying to become a more significant part of her life, presenting himself as someone who could always provide help or support. Unknowingly, Ariadna was getting deeper into their dynamic. On October 30th, 2022, Ariadna accepted Vanessa's invitation to spend the evening with friends. They planned to start at a popular restaurant in downtown Mexico City. Vanessa assured her it would be a relaxed evening filled with good food and enjoyable conversation. Roddel was also expected to join them, which made Ariadna feel slightly uncomfortable. Although she had her reservations about him, she didn't want to disappoint Vanessa, so she decided to go. The group met in the evening at Fisher's, a seafood restaurant, the venue known for its upscale atmosphere and stylish decor, which was lively. At their table, the mood was relaxed. Wine and cocktails were being enjoyed, platters of appetizers added to the festive feel of the night. Roddel took the spotlight, sharing stories, proposing toasts, and engaging playfully with the waitstaff. He exuded confidence and made sure everyone noticed him. Vanessa joined in, lightening the mood with jokes and laughter. The rest of the group attempted to keep the upbeat vibe, but Ariadna stood out because she seemed uncomfortable. She frequently checked her phone, responding to messages and looking concerned as she read the screen. She often glanced at Roddel, as if trying to understand unspoken feelings behind his words. Vanessa tried to draw her back into the fun, urging her to relax and have another drink, but Ariadna remained reserved, her demeanor suggesting that something was troubling her more than the lively atmosphere could hide. In evening, Ariadna shared a puzzling message on her social media: "Would you miss me if I disappeared?" This caused concern among her followers. Some thought it was just a joke, but her close friends and colleagues felt it was out of character for her. The message created an unsettling feeling that, at the time, no one understood would be connected to her last hours. As the night went on, the group decided to continue their evening at Roddel's house, a suggestion made by Roddel himself. Vanessa supported the idea, claiming it would be a more relaxed and private setting. Although Ariadna felt uncertain, she eventually agreed after her friends pressured her. The rest of the group followed along, and they all traveled together to Roddel's home in his vehicle. His house was situated in an upscale neighborhood that reflected his public persona. Inside, the decor was sleek and modern, featuring luxurious elements. Upon arrival, the group settled into a spacious living room where music played and drinks were served, allowing the night to unfold. However, Ariadna started to feel increasingly uneasy. She stepped away several times to check her phone, pretending to take calls, which made her seem distant and distracted. Vanessa noticed her behavior and began whispering to Roddel, which only added to the tension in the room. Near midnight, Ariadna expressed her desire to go home because she was tired. Vanessa encouraged her to stay a bit longer, just another half hour. Roddel said nothing, but his lingering gaze on Ariadna made her uneasy. As the night came to a close, the guests began to depart, and Ariadna was among the last to leave. After that evening, no one in the group would see her alive again. On October 31st, the night before the Day of the Dead, Ricardo Calderon and a friend set off on a bike ride south from Mexico City to Tepoztlan, a popular day trip destination. They turned off the road to rest outside the colonial town. That's where they made a grisly discovery: a woman's body in the bushes beneath an overpass, within earshot of passing traffic. She was lying on her back, with her arms spread out, her beige skirt pulled up above her waist, and her right foot clad in a white high-top sneaker. Her hair was braided, and she had no identification or belongings. They quickly contacted the police, who arrived several hours later. While waiting, they took photos of the scene to document details that might assist in identifying the woman. When the police arrived, they secured the area, started gathering evidence. They found visible tire tracks in the dirt and markings that indicated the body had been moved. Forensic specialists observed signs of a struggle, but they couldn't determine the exact cause of death right away. No weapons were discovered, and the body had no obvious injuries that could explain what happened. There were also no documents or personal items to identify her. Hours later, images of the scene began to spread on social media, causing widespread concern. Among those who saw the photos were friends and family of Ariadna. Her father and her brother, Omar, recognized familiar features, including her tattoos. The tattoo reads, Armida, the name of Ariadna's mother. Another is a sunflower, her signature symbol. They feared the worst, so they filed a missing person report and informed the authorities that the woman found might be Ariadna Lopez. Meanwhile, authorities in the state of Morelos began a separate investigation. However, the local police's initial actions faced significant criticism. They mishandled evidence collection, leaving many crucial details at the scene undocumented. This raised serious concerns about the professionalism and integrity of the involved law enforcement. When Ariadna's family came to identify the body, they faced their worst fears. Omar recognized his sister by a tattoo on her shoulder. The shock was overwhelming, especially upon seeing the state of her body, which bore bruises and trauma on her face and arms, indicating some form of violence. In contrast, the police's initial statements were vague and unconvincing. The family responded by calling for justice, demanding a transparent investigation. On the same day, they contacted friends who used social media to help raise awareness. The campaign quickly gained traction, attracting thousands of users. Despite increasing public pressure, the Morelos police continued to believe that the death could have been an accident. They indicated that a final conclusion could only be reached after the forensic report was finished. This position only fueled further suspicion, especially as rumors started to spread that influential individuals might be attempting to cover up the truth. Investigators first interviewed Rodel and Vanessa, the last known people to see Ariadna alive. Their statements provided the initial account of the situation. Rodel stated that after the party, Ariadna chose to leave his house and called a taxi. He described her as a little upset but not overly concerned. He said he walked her to the door, and she left alone. Vanessa supported his story, confirming that Ariadna took a taxi but did not mention her destination. However, inconsistencies in their account quickly surfaced. The main issue was the absence of any confirmed taxi records. Neither Rodel nor Vanessa could provide the contact information for a driver or any evidence to back up their claims. Later, investigators checked several taxi service logs in the area but found no record of Ariadna being picked up that night. Another concern was the inconsistency in Vanessa's story. Her answers changed depending on the questions asked. At first, she claimed that Ariadna left the party on her own. Later, she mentioned that they had an argument, implying that Ariadna might have been emotionally troubled. Ariadna's friends reported to the police that Vanessa contacted them after Ariadna's disappearance, trying to suggest that Ariadna was in a bad state of mind, referring to her vague social media post. This post, made just hours before Ariadna's disappearance, raised concerns for many. While her family and close friends initially viewed it as a joke, investigators began to think it might signal her emotional distress on the night of the party. Additionally, Vanessa's increasingly anxious behavior was alarming. In messages to Ariadna's friends, she appeared hesitant to discuss the events of that night. At one point, she expressed fear of being suspected, though she didn't explain why. These clues led investigators to believe that Vanessa might be hiding important information. The initial investigation into Ariadna's death did not provide a clear explanation of what happened. However, further inquiries by law enforcement and independent experts revealed important evidence. 2 autopsies, surveillance footage, and text messages from the suspects' phones became crucial in piecing together the events. Oriel Carmona, the state's chief prosecutor, told reporters that an autopsy determined Ariadna Lopez died of severe alcohol poisoning. He stated that investigators found no signs of violence. Sitting at the same table, Yasmin Herrera Soto, the chief medical examiner, clarified the findings. The autopsy showed significant bruising but no fatal injuries. According to the autopsy report, none of the 17 fresh wounds on Ariadna's arms, legs, and torso broke the skin or caused external bleeding, and there were no broken bones or signs of assault. In an interview, Pereira noted that there were a pair of bruises on the back of Ariadna's head that caused internal bleeding in her skull, but no brain damage, and that the bruising was consistent with a fall. The cuts on Lopez's forehead were believed to have been caused by insects attacking her while her body was outside. Prosecutors stated that lab tests showed Ariadna's blood alcohol level was 0.498, a level that is 6 times the legal limit for driving in the United States. According to Carmona, Ariadna choked on her own vomit. Nevertheless, her family strongly disputed this finding. Ariadna's family, unsatisfied with the official explanation, requested an independent second autopsy. Under pressure from the public and her relatives, Ariadna's body was sent to a forensic institute in Mexico City. The results of this second examination contradicted the original conclusions. Experts discovered multiple injuries, including head trauma, bruises, and signs of struggle on her arms and legs, suggesting she may have tried to defend herself. These findings indicated that Ariadna's death was not accidental or solely due to alcohol. Consequently, her death was reclassified as the result of violent actions, leading authorities to treat the case as a criminal matter. Security footage from Rodel's apartment building provided crucial evidence in the case. One video shows Rodel early the morning after the party. A bald, bearded man dragged Ariadna Lopez's body, his legs stiff from rigor mortis, through the hallway and down to the garage. He carried the corpse over his right shoulder to the back of a black SUV, then hurried to the driver's seat. Mexico City Mayor Claudia Sheinbaum identified the man as Rodel Astudillo and accused him of driving the body and dumping it near Tepoztlan, a charge prosecutors later said was substantiated based on analysis of his cell phone records. Sheinbaum said Astudillo likely chose to dump the body in neighboring Morelos state because of his relationship with Carmona, the prosecutor she accused of covering up the case. Sheinbaum said that they had tried to blame the victim. He added that never again should a woman's murder be covered up and a woman be defamed and harmed. Meanwhile, Vanessa often told Ariadna's friends that she might have been having emotional difficulties and suggested she could have intentionally disappeared. However, her friends described Ariadna as lively and optimistic, with no known emotional issues. When the second autopsy and surveillance footage, it became evident that the initial theories of an accidental death or voluntary departure from Rodel's home were not valid. The evidence instead indicated a violent act and a conscious attempt to conceal the body. These findings led to legal actions against Rodel and Vanessa, who would soon face charges in court. Vanessa was the first to be arrested. Authorities discovered that she had been in regular contact with Rodel after Ariadna's death, discussing ways to evade legal consequences. Her arrest occurred amid significant media attention. During initial questioning, Vanessa claimed she was not involved in Ariadna's death, but her statements contained numerous contradictions. She asserted that she had gone to bed early on the night of the incident and knew nothing about what happened afterward. However, further investigations disproved this claim. Message logs indicated that she was aware of the situation and had conversed with Rodel about important details. Investigators also found that Vanessa had taken actions to destroy potential evidence, including deleting photos and conversations, trying to distance herself from the aftermath. Realizing the overwhelming evidence against him, Rodel chose to turn himself in. He arrived at the police station with his legal team and claimed he was innocent. He stated that he did not harm Ariadna. Instead, he panicked after finding her unresponsive in his home the morning after the party and attempted to conceal her body, fearing he would be blamed. However, investigators found significant issues with his version of events. First, a second autopsy revealed clear signs of physical trauma, contradicting his assertion that she died without any interference. Second, surveillance footage showed him intentionally carrying her body in a way that suggested he was trying to avoid being seen, which is not typical behavior for someone seeking help. Furthermore, his text messages with Vanessa indicated that they had coordinated their stories and worked to mislead others about what actually happened. During the investigation, alarming new evidence came to light pointing to possible corruption. There were increasing suspicions about a link between Roddel and a prosecutor in Morelos. Notably, the initial autopsy report from that state failed to mention any injuries that suggested violence. Public activists and Ariadna's family accused the prosecutor of abusing their position to protect Roddel, leading to widespread public anger. In response, authorities in Mexico City began a formal review of the prosecutor's actions, while Internal Affairs launched an independent investigation into potential misconduct. Some witnesses alleged that Roddel had ties to criminal groups, which could explain his seeming assurance that he would escape punishment. Nevertheless, both Vanessa and Roddel denied any direct involvement, instead choosing to defend each other, deflect questions. This evasiveness heightened investigators' suspicions and played a significant role in the decision to keep them in temporary custody. The reasons and events of that night prompted a thorough investigation. To find the truth, investigators had to piece together the timeline, analyze physical evidence, and study the actions of everyone at the gathering. Gradually, a clearer understanding started to take shape. Ariadna Lopez arrived at Fisher's, a bustling seafood restaurant in Mexico City, at around 6 p.m. on October 30th, wearing a long beige dress and white high-top sneakers. She hugged both Vanessa and Roddel. The trio, along with 3 others, left the restaurant about an hour later in Roddel's black SUV. All 6 arrived at Roddel's building at around 7:15 p.m. They took the elevator to his apartment. At first glance, everything seemed typical. There was laughter, conversation, and music, but subtle hints indicated something was off. Witnesses and text message analysis showed that Ariadna was unusually quiet and distracted. She often checked her phone, sending messages and answering calls, behavior her friends noted was unlike her during social events. This detail became important in the investigation. Ariadna's messages to a friend revealed her worries about the gathering and discomfort with certain people there. Although Vanessa and Rotel were the hosts, there was noticeable tension between them. Witnesses later noted that Vanessa directed several sharp comments at Ariadna throughout the night. Ariadna, wishing to avoid drama, responded calmly and tried to defuse any potential conflict. As the night progressed and alcohol began to affect everyone, tensions intensified. Vanessa, already emotional, raised her voice multiple times, accusing Ariadna of being disrespectful and unfriendly. No one else at the gathering agreed with these accusations, but the atmosphere became increasingly tense. While Roddel tried to stay neutral, it was evident that he felt uncomfortable with Vanessa's actions. The turning point occurred the next morning. Witnesses reported seeing Ariadna heading toward the exit, apparently trying to leave the house, but for unknown reasons, she returned shortly after. It is thought that Vanessa confronted her again at that time, escalating their argument. Investigators believe jealousy was at the heart of their conflict, as Vanessa accused Ariadna of attracting too much attention from Roddel. Messages found on phones showed that Vanessa and Roddel later discussed the tense moments from that night. Within about half an hour, 3 of the 6 had left, leaving only Roddel, Vanessa, and Ariadna inside. The case file indicates that Vanessa, influenced by alcohol, became increasingly aggressive. At some point, investigators think an altercation took place, resulting in the fatal injuries Ariadna sustained. Why did Ariadna share such an unusual message on social media that night? Initially, many assumed it was a joke, but her close friends later confirmed that she was likely feeling uneasy because of Vanessa's behavior and the tense vibe at the gathering. The post might have been her way of expressing her discomfort or reaching out for help. As pieced together the events, it became clear that Vanessa's jealousy, heightened by alcohol and her emotional instability, significantly contributed to what transpired. Instead of seeking assistance, Rodel appeared to prioritize hiding what happened, which ultimately made the situation worse. Ariadna's family has worked hard to reveal the full truth about her death. They organized protests, created social media campaigns, and made sure the public remained focused on the case. One major success was attracting international media attention, which increased pressure on Mexico's judicial system to be transparent. In late November, hundreds of people participated in a protest march in Mexico City. The preliminary court proceedings in Ariadna's case were a key moment in their quest for justice. Despite facing some resistance from authorities, her family and their legal team ensured that the case was handled openly and fairly, with all details thoroughly examined. The public and the media closely followed every step of the investigation and court process, minimizing the chances for cover-ups or misinformation. The legal process centered on the actions of Rodel and Vanessa. During the hearings, prosecutors presented strong evidence, including surveillance videos, audio recordings, and text messages from their phones. This evidence suggested not only that they helped hide Ariadna's body but also that they might have been involved in aggressive behavior leading up to her death. The defense claimed it was all a tragic accident, but the extensive witness testimonies and forensic findings raised significant doubts about that explanation. A key part of the trial was uncovering the motive behind the crime. Witnesses who knew Vanessa described her as emotionally unstable and prone to outbursts, especially when drinking. Rodel was depicted as having a questionable past with possible connections to criminal groups, which further complicated his role that night. Although both defendants denied any responsibility for Ariadna's death, their statements often conflicted with established facts, increasing suspicions against them. At this time, the final verdict has not yet been reached, and the investigation is still ongoing. However, prosecutors have charged the suspects with homicide, which may be categorized as femicide, a crime motivated by gender-based violence. In Mexico, this classification is seen as an aggravating circumstance and could result in a maximum penalty of up to 70 years in prison if both suspects are convicted. In January 2023, after reviewing conflicting autopsy results and other evidence, Mexico's Federal Attorney General's office sided with Mexico City prosecutors. The Attorney General stated that the cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head, resulting from a blunt instrument or contact with a flat, hard surface. The coroner's conclusion that Ariadna's death was related to excessive drinking was deemed unacceptable by the Attorney General. Investigators determined that she died in Rodel's apartment on the evening of October 30th, between 10 p.m. and 1 a.m., but they did not provide details regarding a possible motive. Morelos prosecutor, Carmona, denied any wrongdoing. He described the work of his forensic detectives as impeccable and dismissed the Attorney General's findings as mere opinion. Mexico City authorities increased security for the Lopez family to mitigate fears of retaliation by Rodel's accomplices. Ariadna's 7-year-old son is now living with her older brother, Omar. As the closest male role model, he has assumed the responsibilities of both guardian and father. Omar is fully committed to meeting the child's needs while also honoring his sister's memory by providing the love and stability that Ariadna once offered. The rest of the family has rallied around him, determined to help the boy cope with his loss and ensure that he grows up in a nurturing environment. Ariadna Lopez became a symbol of the fight for equality as women marched in the streets on Women's Day with her image on signs. In July 2009, 55-year-old Gloria Huerta Marmolejo vanished without a trace from her home in El Paso, Texas. The day before her disappearance, she had unexpectedly returned from a trip and discovered something in her house that she had likely suspected for a long time. Just hours later, all contact with her was lost. No calls, no messages, no clues. When her son suggested that she might have just gone away for a while, the rest of the family grew concerned. Gloria was not the type to leave without telling anyone. A few days later, her car was found abandoned, and her belongings had been neatly left at home. What started as a typical missing person case soon revealed a chilling truth about long-hidden relationships, a double life, and a betrayal that turned deadly. El Paso is located in the far western part of Texas, right on the border with Mexico. It's known for its mix of cultures, its tense border atmosphere, and its higher crime rates. Despite its rough reputation, generations of families have built their lives there, holding tightly to traditions, loyalty, and the Sunday gatherings that bring everyone together. It was here, on July 28, 1955, that Gloria Marmolejo was born. She grew up in a large, close-knit family of Mexican heritage, where support, family ties, and deep loyalty were passed down through the years. In the early 1970s, Gloria met Armando Marmolejo. He won her over quickly, and by October 11, 1975, they were married. Gloria poured her heart into the relationship, never allowing anyone to speak poorly about her husband and always ready to stand by his side. They had 2 sons, Manny first, then David a few years later. At first, their family life seemed like a model of stability, a house, sons, holidays, and day-to-day life together. However, after David was born, Armando took a job that supposedly required constant travel. He was home less and less until he seemed to disappear entirely. No one really knew what he was doing or where he was going. His business trips were shrouded in secrecy, even relatives were left in the dark. By the time David turned about 6, their father was rarely around. In April 1995, Gloria made the divorce official. Armando moved to a different state, cut off contact with Manny and David. Gloria didn't let this break her spirit. She accepted the situation and focused on raising her sons. According to her brother, she had a different relationship with each of them, tailored to their personalities and needs. As Manny and David grew older, they began to drift apart. Each took his own path and followed his own interests, which was a natural part of life. Manny settled into a steady routine, while David frequently changed his priorities and directions. Gloria, after years of pouring herself into family life, eventually refused to sink into loneliness. At 50, she made a big change. She left her job of 27 years, went back to school, and earned a degree in management. She became a real estate agent, a job that provided her not just with an income, but also with a sense of purpose. It offered her flexible hours and the chance to be in control of her own time. Life eventually settled into a comfortable routine. The house where Gloria lived was tidy, well kept, and surrounded by a garden she loved to care for. She spent her time reading, enjoying the fresh air, and seemed to have found the peace she had always longed for. But everything changed suddenly. One of Gloria's neighbors, an elderly man she had known for years, became seriously ill. His adult son came to take care of him. After the son's arrival, Gloria began noticing some odd things happening. She often saw someone watching her from behind the bushes that bordered their yards. The man would hide, never getting too close, but his stare felt invasive and unsettling. Once, she even saw him holding what looked like a phone or camera, clearly recording her. This wasn't a one-time incident, it happened repeatedly. The sense of safety Gloria had always felt in her home was gone. She tried not to panic, but the tension kept building. Despite everything, she never went to the police. Part of her held back out of compassion for her sick neighbor. She worried that involving the authorities might make things worse. Another part of her felt it was better to wait, to observe, and to avoid making any sudden moves. Rather than contacting the police, she decided to call her brother Mark. She explained the situation clearly and shared her anxiety about it. She asked him to stay connected in case things got worse. While she didn't want to create unnecessary drama, she thought it was important for him to be informed. After that call, the thought of moving began to occupy her mind more frequently. Her sons moved out a long time ago. Manny is now living in Phoenix, and David has also moved to a new location. Although life in El Paso had always seemed stable and familiar, it was starting to feel uncertain. However, moving would mean leaving the home where she had rebuilt her life after her divorce, raised her sons, and rediscovered herself. It was not just a house, it was a part of her story. Leaving felt like relinquishing her past, whereas staying meant enduring ongoing anxiety. Over time, her thoughts of moving evolved into a quiet certainty, signaling that significant changes were approaching. To truly understand what happened, we need to look back at David, Gloria's younger son, during his early childhood. From a young age, David stood out from his classmates, not because he was academically inclined or well-behaved, but because he had a talent for getting into trouble. He found school uninteresting, disliked doing chores, and resisted any attempts to guide him. Unlike his brother Manny, who loved sports and eagerly embraced learning, David chose a different path. He was carefree, ignored school rules, and was always preoccupied with girls. David was restless, never committed to any activity for long. His interests were superficial and constantly changing. It was evident that his main priorities were his appearance, popularity, and the attention he received from girls. Relatives noted that even in his teenage years, he enjoyed being the focus of everyone's attention. He knew how to leverage his good looks, confidence, and charm. While his classmates were still learning about dating, David behaved as if he had everything under control. He felt entitled to attention, viewed girls as just another aspect of his life. This sense of entitlement and inflated self-esteem became defining characteristics of his identity. At the age of 16, he began dating a girl, who became his official girlfriend. However, he still spent time with other girls. To his family and friends, he presented his girlfriend as his serious partner, while secretly, he was seeing other people. She was 2 years younger than him and became pregnant at just 15. This unexpected situation changed everything. Suddenly, David felt he needed to take responsibility. He dropped out of school, found a job, and proposed to her. His decision surprised everyone, even Gloria. Despite her initial shock, Gloria supported David through this difficult time. She accepted his girlfriend as part of the family and quickly offered help with the new baby. After the birth of their first son, they welcomed 3 more children. Gloria played a vital role, helping to raise her grandchildren, managing the household, and providing financial support. The young family lived with her, and once again, Gloria became the center of the home. It felt like she was experiencing motherhood all over again. This time as a grandmother, she dedicated herself to the role with the same passion. Despite his family's encouragement, David struggled to find stability in his life. He changed jobs frequently, never staying in one place for long and showing little desire to advance in any career. At one point, he received a job offer from a construction company in Phoenix, Arizona. This opportunity seemed appealing, as it offered better pay and a chance to reunite with his older brother, Manny, who was already living there. Additionally, their father, Armando, had contacted him after years of no communication, and he, too, was living in Phoenix. The decision to move happened quickly. His partner and the kids joined him. For David, this was a chance to start over, improve his finances, strengthen his relationship with Manny, and possibly reconnect with Armando, something he never thought would be possible. Once in Arizona, David was surrounded by family again, despite the changes. Armando was now living with a partner and raising 2 younger kids, Jonathan and Mariah. Mariah looked up to her older brothers, especially David. To her, he seemed mature, confident, and like a hero she admired. She spent a lot of time at their house, playing with her nephews and helping out. His partner, busy taking care of 4 kids, appreciated the extra help. The family bonds appeared to be getting stronger. During this time, hidden issues were starting to surface beneath the appearance of normal life. Mariah was becoming more involved in David's daily routine, and no one realized how harmful that relationship could be. Mariah, David's younger half-sister, quickly became a constant presence in his life. However, as Mariah matured, David's partner began to notice unsettling changes in David's behavior around Mariah. While everything appeared fine on the surface, she felt that something wasn't right. Their interactions, the way they spoke to each other, the small gestures, their closeness, seemed excessive. Although it could be dismissed as family affection, she couldn't shake her growing unease. She hesitated to make any assumptions, thinking that maybe her concerns were just a result of her own stress and exhaustion. When David got a job offer in Hawaii, he moved there by himself. When Mariah was around 15 or 16, David invited her to spend the summer in Hawaii. At first, everyone thought it was a normal family trip with her brother, his partner, and their children. However, after a few weeks, David's partner began to notice unsettling signs. She saw the way David and Mariah looked at each other and spoke. These little things didn't feel right. What started as a vague concern gradually turned into real suspicion. One day, she walked in on them in the bedroom. Disturbed by what she witnessed, she immediately called Gloria. For Gloria, this news was shocking and heartbreaking. The idea that something inappropriate might be happening between her son and his young half-sister was unbearable. She demanded that it must end immediately, and Mariah was sent back home to Texas right away. The incident did not become public and had no formal repercussions, but it changed the dynamics within the family. Gloria lost trust in her son. Although she tried to act normally, she recognized that this was not just a simple mistake, it felt like a significant threat. The bond of trust was broken. The once strong family ties began to deteriorate quickly. A serious argument erupted between mother and son. Gloria expressed her disapproval openly, criticized David's actions, demanded he cut off all contact with Mariah, and made it clear she wouldn't accept anything like this again. David denied everything, claiming there was no relationship and accusing others of blowing things out of proportion. However, Gloria did not believe him. Her life experiences, cautious nature, and that unique maternal instinct told her that this situation was much more serious than David was willing to acknowledge. After Mariah returned to Texas, the family faced another crisis. David was involved in a serious motorcycle accident on one of Hawaii's winding roads. He lost control of his bike and unfortunately had to have one of his legs amputated. When Gloria found out, she rushed to Hawaii, putting aside any previous disagreements. In that moment, all conflicts were forgotten. Her son needed her, and she responded like any caring mother would. During David's recovery, Gloria stayed with him in the hospital, helping him adapt to his new physical limitations and providing unwavering support. David shared with others that his mother never left his side, always holding his hand, encouraging him, and doing everything possible to help him feel complete despite his loss. After a long rehabilitation, Gloria suggested that David come back to El Paso with her. David agreed, as his relationship with his partner was over and he had little contact with his sons. Returning to his mother appeared to be his only choice. However, Gloria had one strict condition: he must have no contact with Mariah. If he complied, she promised to keep everything that had happened a secret and allow him a chance to start anew. David accepted the condition, and they went back to Texas. Gloria resumed her daily routines, helping her son adjust to his new life, while staying watchful. On the surface, things seemed stable. David appeared calm, contributing around the house and not causing any concerns. After enduring so much chaos, Gloria finally felt like she was regaining control. The neighbor who had been watching her from the bushes still lived next door, which made her uncomfortable. However, now that David was back home, she felt more secure. Even with the tension between them, just having a man around made her feel less exposed. It seemed like the worst was behind her, but her worries lingered. Deep down, she sensed that the situation with Mariah might not be resolved. While everything appeared calm on the outside, Gloria couldn't shake the feeling that a threat was still present. She remained vigilant, scrutinizing every encounter and doubting whether her son had genuinely changed. When David's condition improved and he could care for himself, Gloria decided to take a short trip. Her older son, Manny, had been inviting her to visit him in Phoenix for a long time, and now that her younger son seemed stable, she agreed to go. Before leaving, she asked David to look after the house. At first glance, everything appeared to be fine. He stayed in El Paso, maintained the house, and seemed to follow her instructions. However, while she was in Arizona, Gloria's unease grew. The doubts she had tried to ignore became more persistent. She confided in her brother Mark and asked him to check on David to make sure everything was all right and that Mariah wasn't visiting him. Mark promised to check in, but based on her feelings, Gloria suspected he hadn't actually done much to follow through. Gloria's worries continued to grow until she made the sudden decision to return home unexpectedly. When she arrived, she was shocked by what she found. The house, which had always been clean and organized, was now a total mess, with dirt and clutter everywhere. The most alarming discovery was the locked door to her bedroom, which had a new lock she had never seen before. Anxiously, Gloria called David to ask what was happening. He responded that he was at the movies and would return soon. She waited for him. When David finally came home, they got into a heated argument. Gloria accused him of being disrespectful, breaking his promises, and allowing the house to fall into disarray. David tried to defend himself, saying he would help her pack for a trip back to Phoenix and that he had gone back to the movies afterward. Later that evening, on July 25th, Manny began to feel anxious. He hadn't heard from his mother since she left his house that morning. Despite calling and texting her, he received no replies. He then tried to contact David. Initially, David didn't answer, but as midnight approached, he finally returned Manny's call. David informed Manny that Gloria had come by, they had an argument, and he helped her pack. She likely returned to Phoenix. However, as the night turned into morning, Gloria still hadn't appeared at Manny's place or reached out to any family members. Her phone was off, and there were no messages from her. By the next day, July 26th, it was clear that something was seriously wrong. Manny called David again, but David seemed distant and unhelpful, repeatedly claiming he didn't know anything. His lack of concern was unsettling, making Manny even more convinced that something was amiss. By July 27th, Gloria had been missing for 2 days. Manny contacted everyone he could think of, family, friends, and neighbors, but no one had seen her. It felt like she had disappeared completely. Eventually, he decided to call the police, but they told him that the missing person report needed to come from the last person who saw her, which was David. Soon after, other family members, including Gloria's mother and her brother Conrad, arrived at the house. David greeted them at the door, appearing calm and somewhat indifferent. After much convincing, he finally agreed to go to the police and file a report about Gloria's disappearance. On July 28th, Manny and his wife arrived in El Paso to find something was wrong. As soon as Manny entered the house, he noticed that Gloria's suitcase was in the corner, untouched, and her makeup bag had not been opened. It became clear that she hadn't gone anywhere. She had vanished unexpectedly, without packing or informing anyone. David's explanation about helping her pack didn't make sense since her belongings were still there. Additionally, his behavior was unsettling. He seemed calm and detached, not asking questions or showing any signs of concern. Manny pressed David for details about the last time he saw their mother. David showed Manny some text messages from Gloria, in which she asked him to unlock the door for her. Then, unexpectedly, he added a new part to his story. He claimed that after leaving the house, he went to a party at a woman's house, and later that night, went to a club with another woman. He said he didn't return home until around 3 a.m. During their conversation about their mother, David made a comment that raised alarm. He said he worried they might find traces of his DNA on her. After all, he hugged and kissed her. This statement was confusing, especially since Gloria was reported missing, and no one had suggested anything more serious. The following day, July 29th, local detectives brought in the family members for questioning. David repeated his story, but this time he altered some details. He no longer mentioned going to the movies. Instead, he said he spent the whole evening at the party. A woman confirmed his presence, stating he arrived between 7 and 8 p.m., stayed until midnight, and seemed tense. She did not mention anything about him going to a club with another woman. On that same day, troubling news emerged. Gloria's car was discovered abandoned near an elementary school in El Paso. Her personal items, purse, keys, and phone, were still inside, but there was no sign of Gloria. This changed the investigation from a missing person case to a potential crime, and the Violent Crimes Unit took over. Officers began canvassing the neighborhood. Several residents reported seeing Gloria's car leave the garage on the morning of July 26th. One witness was confident that she had seen Gloria driving. However, another neighbor had a different account. He stated that he saw a young, light-skinned woman with short blonde hair behind the wheel, and he noticed what appeared to be a man's silhouette in the back seat. This was the first solid evidence suggesting that someone other than Gloria had driven her car after she disappeared. The police searched the house and found bloodstains in the garage, mostly on the door of a built-in cabinet. Although there wasn't a large amount, it appeared fresh, leading them to classify the house as a potential crime scene. This discovery prompted detectives to question David more intensively. His accounts were inconsistent, with discrepancies even in basic facts. He struggled with the timeline, frequently changed the order of events, and introduced new details each time he spoke. Throughout the questioning, he remained unusually calm, showing no concern or asking questions about the investigation, which raised suspicions. The police analyzed the blood samples and began collecting DNA from family members. Manny noticed his brother's strange behavior and couldn't stop thinking about Mariah. He felt uneasy about the close relationship between her and David, leading him to urge the police to consider Mariah as a possible suspect, especially given David's partner's previous comments. Investigators examined cell phone data, which revealed important findings. Records show that David made a call between 1:30 and 1:40 a.m. on the night of July 25th to 26th. His phone was located almost 4 miles away from where Gloria's car was found. Additionally, there were several calls between David's and Mariah's phones from 5:30 to 6 a.m., both incoming and outgoing. These inconsistencies, combined with witness statements, changing stories, and digital evidence, suggested that Gloria's disappearance was not an accident and that she did not leave on her own. The investigation had clearly turned into a criminal case, with David and Mariah being the last known individuals to have seen Gloria alive. On July 31st, a woman walking her dog found Gloria's body in the desert in Santa Teresa, New Mexico. The body had started to decompose. Her head was covered with 2 layers, first with plastic and then with a paper bag. Her left leg and arms were also wrapped in plastic. Investigators quickly realized that whoever committed this crime attempted to conceal any biological evidence, suggesting a deliberate act rather than a spontaneous one. The medical examiner determined that Gloria died from suffocation. Her broken larynx indicated that significant physical force was used, showing that the perpetrator had complete control over the situation. This was not a reckless act, it was a calculated and brutal attack. Lab results started to arrive, revealing that the blood samples found in Gloria's garage belonged to Mariah. This discovery made Mariah a key figure in the investigation. Gloria's brother, Mark, informed detectives that before Gloria vanished, she had confided in him her suspicions about David and Mariah having an inappropriate relationship, which she strongly disapproved of. Mariah and David were questioned about their whereabouts on the night of July 25th to 26th. They stated they had spent the entire night together, but cell phone records contradicted this. David's phone made a call at 1:37 a.m., which was almost 4 miles away from where Gloria's body was found later. Additionally, there were calls between David and Mariah at 5:30 and 6 a.m. If they were together the whole night, why did they call each other? Under pressure from investigators, Mariah started to change her story. Eventually, she was offered a deal. She would receive full immunity if she provided the complete truth about what happened. She accepted the offer. Mariah explained that Gloria unexpectedly returned home and discovered her there. This led to a heated argument between Gloria and her son. Gloria insisted that Mariah leave at once and never return. At that moment, Mariah claimed that David lost his temper and became violent, resulting in Gloria's tragic death. Following this, David contacted Mariah to ask for her assistance in covering up the incident. They cleaned the scene to eliminate any evidence and placed Gloria's body in her car, then drove it out of the city. Mariah also confessed that the blood found in the garage belonged to her, as it was from a prior altercation with David. When David buried Gloria, Mariah stated that she was present nearby. Her confession was a crucial turning point in the investigation. On September 4, 2009, David was arrested and faced charges of causing serious harm, hiding evidence, and destroying evidence. The trial began in May 4, 2010. Mariah, who had been given immunity, testified against him. She revealed that their relationship began when she was 14 and he was 29. A startling detail was that she had a child with David, who was later put up for adoption. This information surprised even those who were aware of their relationship. Many family members were unaware of the complete story. Some remained silent while others never suspected anything wrong. Investigators provided more evidence, but no DNA from David was found on Gloria's body. The defense claimed that the case relied on circumstantial evidence. David remained calm and composed in court, occasionally becoming emotional, but consistently insisted on his innocence. The first trial ended without a clear verdict because the jury was unable to reach a unanimous decision. To prevent local bias, it was decided to move the trial to San Antonio. July 10, 2010, David Marmolejo was charged with murdering his mother. In 2011, resulting in David being found guilty and sentenced to 54 years in prison. However, the situation continued to evolve. David was extradited to Arizona in December 2016 to face the crimes he committed against escort service. He is awaiting retrial at the Maricopa County Jail, where he has been held since December 8, 2016. David Marmolejo now faces 29 charges, including 15 counts of abuse assault, 4 counts of armed robbery with a deadly weapon, 4 counts of aggravated assault, 2 counts of abuse, and 4 counts of kidnapping. He initially denied the charges, but his story began to change when a Phoenix detective presented him with evidence. Marmolejo has denied the abuse assault but admitted to picking up approximately 11 escort services during his time in Phoenix. After his arrest in 2006, Marmolejo was reportedly charged with 4 counts of kidnapping, 4 counts of armed robbery, and 10 counts of abuse assault. However, the case was dismissed because 3 of the women could not be found, and the 4th refused to cooperate. Enjoying her freedom, she went to live with her mother. To avoid a life sentence, he made a plea deal with prosecutors, admitting guilt to 6 of the charges while the others were dismissed. Gloria dedicated her life to raising her sons and did everything she could to pull David back from the edge. In the end, he was the one who destroyed everything she had worked so hard to build. The tragic loss of Gloria Huerta Marmolejo revealed the devastating consequences of betrayal within a family she fought to protect. Her unwavering dedication to her sons, especially David, could not shield her from his descent into violence. Convicted of her murder and facing further charges in Arizona, David's actions shattered the bonds Gloria cherished. Her story serves as a haunting reminder that even the strongest love cannot always mend a broken soul, leaving behind a legacy of grief and a call for vigilance against hidden dangers in those closest to us.